Chapter 535, Escape? Enveloped within the column of light that tunneled straight up into the skies, the mighty currents of air surged around Lu Yi, the folds of his robes and the locks of his hair floundering in violent fits in the tumultuous winds. Salvos of flying steel and streaking lights came swooping down on Lu Yi, only to be thwarted by the resplendent pillar of light. Rumble! Something ponderous and large plummeted from the heavens, landing squarely before Lu Yi. As soon as the object slammed into the ground, a tempestuous shockwave erupted from the point of impact, sweeping outwards in all directions and throwing all 1,000 Demon Ridge cultivators around into disarray as all of them tumbled like leaves in the wind. By the time any of them had just regained their footing, their gazes panned up just in time to see Lu Ye's outstretched hand placed on the stone of the divine opportunity column before him. "Until we meet again." Lu Ye's voice echoed, his figure swiftly fading into ethereal wisps before vanishing altogether. The 1,000 Demon Ridge elites all gazed with awe and silence, their hearts seething with frustration. Lu Yi was gone. More than 800, if not 1,000, Demon Ridge cultivators had joined in this hunt. From this number alone, there were over 29th orders, making this a host of sufficient strength to give even a true Lake Realm cultivator a run for his money, never mind a mere third order. Still, despite the odds, they had failed. He had once again eluded their grasp and triumphed. The rarely seen and hugely coveted golden body token, the invoking of a phoenix, even if it was just a mere image of the mystical vermilion phoenix, capable of rending the heavens and sundering the earth, plus the summoning of the enigmatic divine opportunity column. All of these marvels had manifested within one singular being and just one alone, Lu Yi. It was precisely due to these inexplicable and yet fortuitous circumstances that a third order like Lu Yi managed to slip through their grasp in the end. The expressions of the enemy ninth orders contorted with dismay as they gazed at the divine opportunity column that had been the instrument of Lu Yi's escape. There was no longer any point in blaming either luck or themselves. The Carnage Coliseum had ended and Lu Yi was gone. That was all that mattered. One after another, the 1,000 Demon Ridge elites left. All that was left in their wake was the solitary divine opportunity column. The lonesome obelisk of divine magic that was the testament and relic to Lu Yi's unbelievable struggles today. No other third other could have lived through such tribulations and boast of the feats that Lu Yi had accomplished, facing down nearly 1,000 enemy cultivators where most of them were elites who were way beyond his league and yet escaped from them. Hardly anyone would doubt that Lu Yi's name would spread far and wide after this today. In the future, should he return to the Cloud River battlefield, he would undoubtedly attract the attention of many ambitious individuals. Needless to say, eyes would be trained on him the next time he stepped into the Cloud River battlefield. Lu Yi's blood-drenched figure materialized in the Sanctum of Providence at the top of the summit of fortitude of the Crimson Blood Sect main stronghold sitting atop the lofty Mount Ao highlands of Bingzhou province. With wobbling footsteps, he quickly reached out a hand to steady himself against the divine opportunity column beside him to prevent himself from collapsing. Cultivators entering the Cloud River battlefield from the stronghold of their sects or orders could choose to appear anywhere in the Cloud River battlefield, as long as that location had a divine opportunity column. But due to the information inscribed within the battlefield imprint, cultivators would be sent back to the Sanctum of Providence of their main stronghold if and when they were to leave the battlefield. "Get Sister Shui Yuan. Quick!" Lu Yi croaked weakly. He emerged from inside Amber and darted outside. She came back seconds later with Shui Yuan beside her. The latter frowned when she saw Lu Yi's pathetic appearance. "What on earth happened?" "It's a long story, sister." Lu Yi managed a weak smile at her, struggling to maintain his clarity. "Help." With that, he went limp and collapsed to the ground. Even at the third order of the Cloud River realm, using glyph, Fire Phoenix still inflicted a crippling drawback on him whenever he used it. But he could not afford to lose consciousness before he was away from the dangers in the Cloud River battlefield. Coming back to the main stronghold of the Crimson Blood Sect had assured him that he was finally safe and that caused him to faint at last. Fortunately for him, Shui Yuan was quick enough to catch him before he crumbled to the ground. His awareness drifted in and out of consciousness like a piece of flotsam in the swirling currents as an overwhelming weariness incessantly stung at every fiber of his being. Many times, in that semi-conscious state, Lu Yi thought he had heard the gentle voice of his mentor Tang Yifeng. His sense of time blurred for a long, long time, until he suddenly jolted awake. The gentle sound of water lapping against something solid reached his ears. Lu Yi blinked his eyes open, momentarily disoriented before gradually regaining his senses. He found himself sitting inside a giant tub filled with a soothing emerald green broth. Amber was waddling about inside with a contented expression on its face. Sensing Lu Ye's gaze, Amber looked up and purred cheerfully at him. He noticed and hurried in. Lighting up with surprise, she exclaimed, "You're awake, Lu Yi?" Lu Yi acknowledged with a wordless grunt and assessed himself. He was doing quite well. His injuries had completely healed, even those underlying issues that he had been accumulating from his previous other battles were no more. His body still felt weak and his spiritual power was still depleted, but evidently, Shui Yuan had worked her magic on him. A day or two of rest and recovery should see him back into full health. "How long have I been asleep?" he asked. 2 days, Yi replied. Lu Yi nodded. Sister Shui Yuan had certainly delivered her proverbial goods once again with her healing skills that far surpassed that of Hua Xi. He recalled the first time he unleashed Glyph, Fire Phoenix, on his foes. Hua Xi had taken several days to nurse him back to health. Shui Yuan only took 2 days. He lowered his head to inspect his battlefield imprint. Name: Lu Yi. Affiliation: Acolyte of the Crimson Blood Sect. Cultivation, 3rd Order of the Cloud River Realm. Location: Mount Ao Range of Bingzhou Province. Contribution points: 6,120 achievements. 56. His tally of over 100,000 contribution points had dwindled down to a mere fraction, a consequence of the immense cost of calling upon the Divine Opportunity column. Since the last time he had bought the 2-point restoration pills for Li Baxin, this was his first time spending such a vast amount of points. The point restoration pills at least had the practical use of repairing Li Baxin's spiritual points, but the Divine Opportunity column that he had summoned had no further utility beyond enabling his return to the real world of Jianghu a few days ago. And it would be there indefinitely. There was no way to move it elsewhere at all. If only he was not forced into using so many contribution points just to gain access to one Divine Opportunity column. The sheer amount would have been enough for him to go on a spending spree in the Vault of Providence. While he was reflecting upon his losses, Shui Yuan walked in. She casually inquired, "How are you feeling now?" "I'm feeling better now," he replied. "Good. Now that you're back here, stay indoors for now and focus on your recuperation. Don't get into trouble." "Yes." After hearing of Lu Ye's exploits in the Cloud River battlefield from Shui Yuan was indignant at the arrogance of Thousand Demon Ridge cultivators while feeling distressed about her junior brother's plight. Being at the Divine Sea realm, there was only just so much she could do for Lu Yi. Back then in the Spirit Creek battlefield, she could forcefully intervene on his behalf, but there was no way she could enter the Cloud River battlefield. She came over and examined him, ensuring that he truly was improving before she finally relaxed. Sister Shui Yuan?" "Yes. I need to get dressed. I was the one who stripped you. There's nothing in that tub that will surprise me." Shui Yuan scowled, rolling her eyes at him before she turned to walk out of the room. Lu Yi did not even know how to respond to that. Lu Yi emerged from his chambers after he was finished dressing. The glaring sunlight blinded him for one fleeting moment as soon as he stepped out of the threshold as the gentle melodies of birdsong and insect chirping filled his ears. Lu Yi stretched lazily as he took in the sweet scent of flowers lingering in the air, appreciating the tranquility of the peace after the chaos a few days before. He called for Yi, but instead, he went and found his mentor Tang Yifeng. He paid his respects and sat for a lecture. After leaving his mentor's presence, he was immediately greeted by an irresistible aroma of food wafting through the air. Following his nose, he arrived at the dining hall, where, as expected, Shui Yuan had prepared a table full of delectable dishes. The appearance of food Shui Yuan prepared looked so much more delicious and remarkably awesome than Hua Xi's, even though the food cooked by Wuxia was just as nourishing. So long as one could ignore how hideous and unappetizing her cooking was, one could still find her food enjoyable all the same. After indulging in a hearty meal and exchanging a few words with Shui Yuan, he headed straight for the summit of bamboo. Shui Yuan had assigned the summit to Lu Yi some time ago, making him the master of the summit of bamboo. That was in conjunction with his ascension into the Cloud River realm. She had allowed him to choose one of the few foothills within the Crimson Blood Sect domain, and he suggested the summit of bamboo. It was quite close to the summit of fortitude, and many of his juniors had assisted in the construction of its amenities back then. However, not long after entering the Cloud River realm, Lu Yi entered the Cloud River battlefield, which left him with little time to spend at the summit of bamboo. Now, as he arrived, he could see pavilions and spires standing out amidst the sea of clouds rolling around them, an almost celestial ambience as if he had stepped into paradise. He entered one of the buildings and casually picked a room, settling down for some time of meditation and cultivation. The main stronghold of the Crimson Blood Sect was just a quiet and empty place devoid of much human activity. With most of the sect's membership being low-tier cultivators aside from Lu Yi and Zhu Jia, everyone else was still inside the Spirit Creek battlefield to focus on their training and seldom returned to the main stronghold. But once the rest of the sect's acolytes progressed further, the stronghold would become livelier once again. Wuxia should also be on the cusp of reaching the Cloud River realm by now, realized Louis. He stuffed another spirit pill into his mouth as he continued his meditation and practice, restoring his spiritual power. The next day, Lu Yi left the summit of bamboo in a hurry. He first went to Lunar Mirror to catch some fish before heading back to the summit of fortitude. He looked for Shui Yuan and told her, "I wish to re-enter the Spirit Creek battlefield, Sister Shui Yuan." Shui Yuan looked puzzled. What for? 4 Cloud River realm cultivators like Lu Yi, re-entering the Spirit Creek battlefield required paying a certain amount of contribution points. The higher one's cultivation rank, the more contribution points were needed. Shui Yuan, for example, would need to pay several thousands of contribution points each time she re-entered the battlefield. Payback, Lu Yi replied curtly. He had made a promise to the 1,000 Demon Ridge elites before he was transported away from the Cloud River battlefield. He had vowed to repay them for their actions 100-fold in the future. To the 1,000 Demon Ridge elites, those words might be dismissed as mere bravado. But for someone who had just endured such an ordeal and narrowly escaped death, there was no way Lu Yi would let the offense he had taken slide. If anything, he was determined to follow through on his words and cause havoc in the Spirit Creek battlefield. If he couldn't defeat those enemy 8th and 9th orders from the Cloud River realm, then he might as well inflict his wrath on their juniors, those who were still in the Spirit Creek battlefield. If others could take advantage of their strength to bully him, why can't he turn the tables on them and play the same game with the same rules too in the Spirit Creek battlefield? As once the most feared person in the battlefield, no one there could possibly be his match. After all, he needed to reclaim what he had lost, 100,000 contribution points and that golden body token which he was forced to use, from the Spirit Creek battlefield, no matter what it took. Shui Yuan immediately grasped Lu Ye's intentions. Her eyebrows furrowed as she attempted to dissuade him. Forcibly re-entering the Spirit Creek battlefield doesn't grant you free reign, Louis. For a Cloud River realm cultivator like you, it's quite the opposite. Even if you're more powerful, the heavens will penalize you for any lives you take. It's a form of protection that the heavens provides for lower-level cultivators. I know. That's why I want to ask your help on how you managed to withstand the judgment of the heavens. The first time he met Shui Yuan was still vividly embedded in his mind. She was wielding an absurdly wicked-looking battle scythe back then, striking down any adversaries that attempted to come near him. Even as the terrifying judgment of the heavens never stopped tormenting her, she remained unfazed. A warm fuzzy feeling welled up within his heart whenever he recalled that fleeting smile, no matter how much time had passed. Chapter 536, Resurface. The judgment of heavens was a divine mechanism ordained as an inescapable retribution. Thus, Lu Yi needed to unravel the mystery of how Sister Shui Yuan could resist its devastating power. Once he resolved this enigma, He could then roam the Spirit Creek battlefield and do as he liked. Shui Yuan's head swayed sideways wistfully. No. I could do nothing, I was only enduring the pain. Pausing, she continued, her gaze distant, my circumstances are unique, as you might have already realized. Raising a trembling hand to her chest, she continued, since my very birth, I have had another persona dwelling within me, that is Mo Yuan whom you met back then. Most of the time, you won't be seeing her. She rarely surfaces, for she appears only when I'm not myself, or I am unconscious. Lu Yi nodded in understanding. Lu Yi was oblivious to this when he first arrived at the Crimson Blood Sect stronghold. He had not thought much about why Shui Yuan and Mo Yuan would look so starkly alike. If he were to compare them both, he would only think Shui Yuan as a reduced facsimile of the other. Back then, he had mistaken them both as sisters. But over these years, he had been gradually piecing together bits and pieces until he had a better picture. Therefore, hearing Shui Yuan telling him the truth did little to surprise him. She possesses an extraordinary constitution that grants her a very high endurance. That is why, though the judgment of the heavens is inflicted upon her after killing a few enemies, it scarcely bothered her. Still, her endurance is not without its limits. There's a threshold that even she cannot cross lest she endangers herself, said Shui Yuan before her narrative flowed on. Twice she came back from the Spirit Creek battlefield with the judgment of the heavens coiling around her, and each time, she would retreat into a deep slumber to wait out the judgment until it fades. And since the judgment affects only her, it has no effect on me. There were 2 instances where Wei Yang killed enemy Spirit Creek realm cultivators. Once during the Battle of Golden Tip and the second time when Lu Yi was poisoned by the heavenly derivative sect. The more enemies one kills in the Spirit Creek battlefield, the more powerful the judgment of the heavens will be. Correspondingly, its duration will also extend. So if you are certain of re-entering the Spirit Creek battlefield, Lu Yi, be careful not to kill too many enemies. While I've yet to sample the horrors of the awe-inspiring judgment of the heavens, I assure you, it's not a force to be recklessly courted. A single misstep might well cost you the essence of your soul. And if so, woe betide you, brother. So beware. But surely there are ways to counter the judgment? Countered Lu Yi, still not willing to give up. Such is the retribution of the heavens, brother, Shui Yuan responded with finality. I see, Lu Yi acknowledged. Shui Yuan observed the shadows that flickered within his gaze. She could detect the reluctance and defiance still lingering about Lu Yi. It was clear that he would still re-enter the Spirit Creek battlefield, judgment of the heavens or not. Before he left, she cautioned, whatever you do, Lu Yi, practice caution above all else. Do not court unnecessary risk. Lu Yi took his leave with frustration budding in his mind. If he was going to be constrained, being unable to kill enough enemies in the Spirit Creek battlefield to invoke enough fear, then perhaps he should take Biki with him? He could undo the defensive wards of enemy outposts and leave the killing to Biki. But for that to happen, Biki would need to be at the Crimson Blood Sect outposts in the battlefield. Back when he was about to ascend into the Cloud River realm and leave the Spirit Creek battlefield, he had set Biki free from his years of service in keeping the Crimson Blood Sect outpost safe from invasion. The gigantic eagle had devoted itself to that charge solely out of its loyalty to the late Feng Wujiang, Tang Yifeng's first student and Lu Ye's senior, who was also Biki's former master. Irrespective of whatever it was Lu Yi was about to do, he would first need to get into the Spirit Creek battlefield. If no other solution had presented itself by the time he had reached there, he would just have to limit his number of kills. Lu Yi stepped into the sanctum of providence and placed his hand on the divine opportunity column to commingle his mind to it. A revelation unfolded. He could not re-enter the Cloud River battlefield anymore, at least not for another month. But the entry into the Spirit Creek battlefield was still open to him, although the response he received from the Divine Opportunity column demanded a solemn toll, the offering of 500 contribution points for his current rank of cultivation. A nominal tribute, one might say, akin to a coin dropped into a fathomless well. At the cusp of his mental wish, Lu Ye's corporeal form vanished and he reappeared moments later, now within the Crimson Blood Sect outpost in the Spirit Creek battlefield. Yet, a tempest of unseen forces came crashing down on him, an arcane current that imposed its dominion upon the very essence of his being. Lu Yi immediately felt his spiritual power being suppressed, the riverine flow of his Cloud River Realm third-order eldritch essence now truncated to a mere trickle. He knew what it was, the heavens' restriction at play. His etheric strength was completely gone with a portion of his spiritual points sealed. For any cultivator beyond the Spirit Creek realm to re-enter the Spirit Creek battlefield, their cultivation rank would be subjugated back to their zenith when they were last a member of this battlefield. Lu Yi channeled his spiritual powers more and more in gradual paces, using the Great Sun Valurium technique to funnel the flow of his eldritch essence into his spiritual points. With his spiritual power surging more smoothly now, his rank of cultivation slowly rose back up. He could feel it. The first order of the Spirit Creek realm, the second order, then the third order, all the way until he was restored back to Heaven 9. It did not take long for the acolytes at the outpost to realize that there was someone in the sanctum of Providence. "Hold up, is that Brother Lu Yi?" one of them cried. Some of them could barely believe their eyes and ears. As far as most of the newer acolytes were concerned, Lu Yi had made the rise into the Cloud River realm quite some time ago. But what was he doing here when he should be in the Cloud River battlefield by now? They rubbed their eyes to make sure that they were not mistaken. Sure enough, that really was their senior brother Lu Yi. But the commotion had attracted the notice of everyone else in the outpost, causing them to overrun Lu Yi with choruses of endless cheers and warm greetings. News of his arrival swept across the outpost like a bushfire raging through a field in a dry season. Lu Yi left the outpost after that and scaled a nearby foothill where Biki made its home. But the nest was empty and the gigantic eagle was nowhere to be found, cutting short his initial plan of letting Biki do the killing for him. A stranger approached, riding atop his flying conveyance that landed with the grace of a falling leaf beside Lu Yi. The person made the sign of a salute saying, "Greetings, Brother Lu Yi." Lu Yi turned his gaze, recognizing who it was, one of the first cohorts of independent cultivators admitted as acolytes of the Crimson Blood sect, although Lu Yi could not quite remember his name. "You're Tao Jianghu, sir? I'm the present legate of this outpost." Over time, the Crimson Blood sect outpost had laid witness to several rotations of both its legates and prolgates. Thanks to the abundance of supplies and consumables needed for the cultivation of their power and the luxuriant ambient spiritual qi in the atmosphere surrounding the outpost, the acolytes have all been advancing swiftly. Most of the time, acolytes, upon reaching the 8th order, would begin roaming the inner ring areas of the Spirit Creek battlefield. As a consequence, the tenure of the legates and prolgates would often be brief since they became 8th orders in no time. Even shorter, in fact, when compared to the tenure of legateship and prolegateship at outposts situated within the inner ring and central areas of the battlefield. Lu Yi bobbed his head in acknowledgement and asked, "Do you know where Biki is?" "Unknown, I'm afraid. It frequents the vicinity of the outpost less often nowadays. It would come back once in a while, but only to depart before too long." Even as Tao Jianghu relayed this information, he could not help observing Lu Yi as astutely as he could. Why had Lu Yi come here suddenly? Tao Jianghu reflected on the events that had transpired since assuming the role of legate of the Crimson Blood sect outpost, but he could recall no glaring errors on his part at all. With cautious delicacy, he broached the subject. Brother Lu Yi, is there a purpose to your visit today?" "Yes. I have something to take care of," Lu Yi responded casually, his mind drifting into contemplation. With Biki's whereabouts enshrouded in mystery, seeking it out at this juncture seemed unfeasible. But without the giant eagle to accompany him, his ability to kill enemies would suffer, and so would his potential to instill dread within the many sects and orders of the Thousand Demons Ridge Coalition. In the midst of his thoughts, Lu Yi pondered over his dilemma. How would he reclaim the 10,000 contribution points and the golden body token that he had lost on account of the pursuit that had so nearly killed him? Or should he just take this as merely a quest for payback and vent his frustration? With his current proficiency in wardcasting, no Thousand Demon Ridge outposts were safe from him. But merely conquering enemy outposts, unless coupled with substantial benefits, seemed to lack meaningful purpose. This left Lu Yi ensnared in a quandary. Truly, reality, often fraught with numerous twists and turns, rarely unfolds as anticipated. In the meantime, Lu Ye's silent reticence was weighing Tao Jingyu down with unspoken pressure. After a pause that felt like an eternity, Lu Yi finally broke his silence. So be it then. Come, we'll see what we can do. However, there was little doubt that whatever he did, it would immediately send every Thousand Demon Ridge sect or order into distress. Word of the annihilator of sects' return would surely stir apprehension in the hearts of all who beheld it. Given the constraints on the number of lives he could take, Lu Yi calculated that he could only target 1 or 2 enemy sects at most. But that was why he brought along Tao Jingyu, so that the latter could seize the blessings from the enemy divine opportunity columns of the sects and orders he conquered. It wouldn't do to leave any advantage untapped. Lu Yi conjured his flying conveyance, and with Tao Jingyu, they ascended into the skies. Tao Jingyu remained baffled. Up until now, he was still oblivious to Lu Ye's intentions. But he chose not to pry, opting to just follow in silence. The journey was tranquil, a serene voyage. Traveling from the outermost rim of the Spirit Creek battlefield to the core circle demanded a considerable trek, and if Lu Yi still wielded his Cloud River Realm Third Order power, the duration would have been reduced to a mere 2 or 3 days. But now that his current capabilities were restricted to just Heaven 9 of the Spirit Creek realm, the time would naturally be doubled. Thankfully, his current flying conveyance was of a middle grade, granting him greater speeds compared to the lower-tier counterparts, although its singular drawback lay in its heightened consumption of his spiritual power. The infrequent stops along the way to rest allowed Tao Jingyu to gain a profound appreciation for the formidable depths of Lu Ye's power. Prolonged flights using magical conveyances generally strained a cultivator's reserve of spiritual power, and replenishment on the go remained a challenge. Yet, Lu Yi proved himself an extraordinary exception by how he could tirelessly maintain his journey without anything more than a half-hour's rest each day. In a mere 4 days, the duo arrived at the heart of the Spirit Creek battlefield. Lu Yi extracted his map, scrutinizing it closely as he pondered about attacking either the New Moon sect or the Clouded Sun sect. Tan Xing was a member of the New Moon sect, a fact Lu Yi had confirmed during a casual conversation with Li Baxian, while the Clouded Sun sect was where Wei Kei hailed from. Both the sect's outposts were situated within the core circle of the battlefield, and Lu Yi knew about them. Back when he was still here, the legates of the 2 outposts had come offering their tributes as a gesture of peace before. Lu Yi might have not personally dealt with them closely before, but he knew them enough. Given the constraint of limiting his kills, he needed to make a careful choice. Ultimately, Lu Yi decided to just attack the New Moon sect. All the troubles and perils that had compelled Lu Yi to make use of his golden body token to prevent him from dying, and more than 100,000 contribution points to summon the divine opportunity column to escape to freedom, everything began from Tan Xing's utilization of the tracking disc. In essence, it was Tan Xing's fault that everything started. This was a score that Lu Yi wanted to settle, and hence, he would reclaim the losses he had suffered from the New Moon sect. After another half-day of travel, they finally arrived 10 leagues outside the New Moon sect's outpost. Lu Yi landed his flying conveyance. He took Amber and handed it to Tao Jingyu, instructing, "Wait here." Tao Jingyu took Amber in his hands, acknowledging him with a nod, and obediently stood in place. Lu Yi dashed straight for the New Moon sect outpost. He knew that this headlong charge at the enemy outpost was bound to involve confrontation with the enemy cultivators. Having Tao Jingyu, who was only just a 7th order, around in such a skirmish would pose certain inconveniences. That was why he chose to just leave him away from the fighting with Amber, and to keep him safe was a more prudent decision. In just the blink of an eye, Lu Yi covered 10 leagues, arriving at the front gates of the outpost. The golden dome of the New Moon sect outpost's defensive ward looked like a gigantic bowl of shimmering radiance. The luminescent barrier did not look particularly corporeal, suggesting that the defensive ward wasn't operating at its fullest capacity, which was understandable since no one would actively seek to invade another sect's outpost. No one except a certain individual called Lu Yi. Back when it was known that his newfound ability allowed him to undo the magic of defensive wards, the entire battlefield turned into a chaotic mess. It was only after his ascension into the Cloud River realm did the 1,000 Demon Ridge sects and orders here rejoiced at the coming of a more tranquil period. However, no one could have foreseen that the harbinger of turmoil would resurface once more after a barely 3-month hiatus, here to again wreak havoc upon the battlefield. Chapter 537, How Dare You? Lu Yi was just outside the New Moon Sect outpost when he lowered himself to a crouch to better observe the luminescent shield of the defensive ward with his glyph, Insight Augmented Sight. This did not go unnoticed by one of the sentries keeping watch. He hurried here at once and growled from the other side of the wall of light, "Who goes there?" There was little reason for his tone to be friendly, not when a suspicious stranger was skulking about outside. Lu Yi pensively shot him indifferently, "Who do you think I am?" The odd question startled the enemy cultivator. He looked at Lu Yi more closely. This time, he could almost swear that he must have seen the face somewhere before. Somehow, he was confident that he had never personally met this stranger before, despite the palpable feeling of familiarity. But before he could demand a name, the stranger was already gone. Lu Yi had wandered off to look for weaknesses in the shield to exploit, which he found as he began casting his ward flags. If Lu Yi still wielded the rank of a Cloud River Realm Third Order, he could have easily ripped open the magical shield through brute force alone due to the defensive ward not working at full capacity yet, at a bare subsistence level. But now that he was limited to just the Heaven 9 rank of the Spirit Creek realm, he could only rely on his fundamentals in ward casting. "Hey, what are you doing?" The enemy cultivator barked again, dubious about what Lu Yi was doing. Lu Yi ignored him and continued his work. The enemy cultivator shifted in a swift change of countenance, his gaze falling upon Lu Yi once more. Finally, he realized the reason behind the nagging familiarity of the stranger before him. Indeed, he had not personally encountered Lu Yi before, but he had seen the face before in a sketch. However, it had been nearly 3 months since Lu Yi was believed to have departed the Spirit Creek battlefield for good. It had never crossed his mind that the figure before him was the same Lu Yi who had reappeared once more and right outside the entrance of his order's outpost to boot. "You are that annihilator of sects," exclaimed the figure, stumbling backward as though Lu Yi were some ferocious monster, an insurmountable terror. Without hesitation, he spun on his heels and cast into the air a flying conveyance that he hopped on at once, soaring up into the sky, towards the inner cloisters of the outpost with urgent haste as he squawked with the voice of a tolling bell, "The Annihilator of Sects! The Annihilator of Sects has arrived." Catastrophe had fallen on their heads with the unannounced advent of the much-feared Annihilator of Sects Lu Yi. All who heard the cries sank into deep doubt about the outpost's defenses. Multitudes of New Moon Sect acolytes stirred with trepidation and uncertain alarm. A thunderous command rang out, "Who dares utter such nonsense?" As the voice resonated with the force of a thunderclap, a robust figure, riding atop his flying conveyance, emerged from the edifice of the outpost. "Brother Tanli, it's the Annihilator of Sects," reported the sentry who had just left Lu Yi to deliver the ill tidings to none other than the legate of the New Moon Sect outpost Tanli, currently ranked 58th upon the Spirit Creek battlefield's roll of supremacy. Tanli was arguably the most formidable cultivator stationed here. "Say again." "Who?" Tanli's brow furrowed with skepticism, tingling his thoughts as he wondered if his hearing was failing him. "The Annihilator of Sects. Lu Yi of the Crimson Blood Sect." "That's impossible," bellowed Tanli. "That fellow's a Cloud River realm cultivator 3 months ago. He should be in the Cloud River battlefield by now. How could he possibly be here?" "But I'm sure of this, Brother Tanli. This is not a mistake. That really is the Annihilator of Sects outside there. I have seen his likeness before in a sketch." Tanli's brows knitted together. Maybe he's just someone who looks like Lu Yi? Not that resemblances were hardly uncommon occurrences, but most of all, Tanli was unwilling to believe that the Annihilator of Sects would be here, just outside this very outpost at this very moment. "He's trying to bring down the defensive ward as we speak, sir." "What?" Tan Li gasped with unbridled astonishment. As if to prove the sentry's point, the control gem that allowed him the full helm of the defensive ward's operation was trembling. Before he could even extract the control gem from inside his clothing to have a proper look at it, a streak of light jetted across the distant horizon, arriving in the blink of an eye. It really was the annihilator of sects Lu Yi. He had encountered Lu Yi before. Tan Li was the one leading the New Moon sect contingent of cultivators in the Thousand Demon Ridge entrapment of Lu Yi on the outskirts of the Myriad Poison Forest. That was why he knew Lu Yi. But Lu Yi hardly remembered him. Given how many enemy cultivators he was facing at the time, it was only just understandable. What mattered to Tan Li was why did Lu Yi come back? What was his reason for coming back to the Spirit Creek battlefield, and why, of all places, here? A colossal blend of incredulity and apprehension loomed in Tan Li's mind. While his expression remained solemn, his countenance betrayed not a trace of agitation. If it were the Lu Yi of old, the same Lu Yi who was just a Heaven 9 cultivator, then he would be truly afraid. But knowing that Lu Yi could only be here by forcefully entering the Spirit Creek battlefield as a Cloud River Realm cultivator, there was little need for undue concern. To expect that he would triumph against Lu Yi in an all-out skirmish would be futile. There was no discounting the various feats the latter had accomplished back when he still reigned over the entire battlefield with terror. At least Tan Li was certain that he would never best Lu Yi in a fight. Still, not that it mattered anyway, not now. Would Lu Yi dare to kill anyone with the same savageness as he once did? The judgment of heavens was no trifling matter. If more elite cultivators were allowed to casually kill and raise to their heart's content, then all outposts, those belonging to all big and small sects and orders alike, would have long been laid to waste by now. But why is Lu Yi here? Tan Li wondered with dread. Is he not afraid of the judgment of the heavens? At any rate, he was sure that Lu Yi did not come as a friend. After all, he was a member of the Grand Sky Coalition and the members of the Thousand Demon Ridge. If anything, all major sects and orders in the Ridge wanted the head of Lu Yi on a silver platter more than anything. Who could tell how much Thousand Demon Ridge blood had been spilled because of him? How many friends and allies of theirs had he slain? To describe him as a veritable harbinger of death would not be an overstatement. With this notion at the forefront of his thoughts, Tan Li advanced a few paces, his countenance grave as he regarded Lu Yi. You should be at the Cloud River battlefield, Lu Yi. What brings you here to our outpost? What do you want with us? You know Tan Sheng? Is he a fellow member of the New Moon sect? Lu Yi asked, his hand subtly finding the hilt of his blade, his voice a steely whisper. Tan Li's brows furrowed warily upon those words, a contemplative air enveloping him. Indeed, he is my blood sibling. What do you want with him? Oh, so you're Tan Sheng's real younger brother? Lu Ye's brows peaked with a flicker of surprise dancing in his eyes. What an unexpected revelation. I am. Most intriguing. Lu Yi inclined his head. Tan Sheng extended me his care and hospitality when we met each other in the Cloud River battlefield. I came today to return the favor. Before the final syllable was even out of his lips, Lu Ye's figure blurred into a phantom-like silhouette surging forward like a tempest unleashed, aimed with unfaltering determination toward Tan Li. Tan Li had been harboring a semblance of caution, but he was ill-prepared for the suddenness of Lu Ye's attack. This was quite at odds with his expectations. He had surmised that Lu Yi, being a Cloud River Realm cultivator here in the Spirit Creek battlefield, would refrain from living up to the full extent of his reputation by indulging in reckless violence. The taste of having the judgment of heavens tormenting one's body and soul was not one easily endured. Lu Yi translating his threat into a real attack really was not what he expected. In the face of such an impending crisis, Tan Li quickly conjured his weapon, a giant shield that drew upon his inner reservoir of spiritual power, interposing it before him. A colossal boom resounded through the air as the impact struck, threatening to drive Tan Li into the ground. His eyes widened as a cocktail of astonishment and trepidation flooded his senses. What proved even more unsettling was the realization that the spiritual power glow that enveloped his shield had dimmed just after sustaining one blow, its essence chipping away. Tan Li could not quite believe it. As a Heaven 9 cultivator and numbered among the 50th of the Spirit Creek battlefield's finest upon the roll of supremacy, there were few who would doubt his strength and prowess. Coming in here as a Cloud River Realm cultivator, Lu Yi's power had been dialed down to Heaven 9. Still, his attack was one that had nearly sundered his defenses. Never before had Tan Li truly fought against Lu Yi before. Though cognizant of Lu Yi's prowess, he understood little about the latter's deadliness in battle, until this very instant. Brother Tan. Surrounding acolytes of the New Moon sect bore witness as Tan Li was cast down by the tempestuous strike, their collective astonishment echoing in the air like a chorus of startled birds. Simultaneously, within the heart of the maelstrom of blurriness and danger, Tan Li felt the resounding impact of another assault upon his once stalwart shield. A sonorous crash heralded the shattering of the protective relic, a formerly formidable defensive weapon bonded with non-opal enchantments. Tan Li's visage contorted with a mixture of disbelief and panic. Swift as a coursing wind, Lu Yi caught up closely behind with inviolable arcing in a horizontal sweep. Stripped of his shield and dispossessed of the sanctuary it provided, Tan Li's only recourse was to marshal the depths of his spiritual power and vital essence, conjuring a protective aura bristling over the surface of his flesh. Inviolable stroke drew blood. Tan Li plummeted heavily to the earth, the echo of impact mingling with his anguished cry. A gaping wound cleaved his abdomen, so deep that it almost unveiled the morbid discombobulation of his entrails, an unsightly tableau of vulnerability. A shiver coursed down his spine. For once in his life, the specter of death loomed so near at his threshold. Were it not for his stalwart physical constitution as a body-tempering cultivator whose bodily defenses were fortified by unyielding tenacity, the rending strike would have cloven him into two bloody halves. In the meantime, Lu Yi found himself mildly astonished with a quiet exhalation of wonder escaping his lips. The resilience of a body-tempering cultivator really was starkly in contrast to the usual lot of cultivators adopting other disciplines. Lu Yi advanced upon his prey, poised to deliver a final blow before he was disrupted by the cacophonous symphony of howling air and whistling winds. Seeing their legate fall, the rest of the New Moon sect had decided to spring into action, unable to contain their tumultuous fervor. What fear they had for Lu Yi dissolved into irrelevance. What mattered was saving their leader, whatever the cost. For they were many, and fear for just a lone adversary seemed an awful absurdity. Colorful ribbons of arcane incantations screaming through the air intertwined with the radiant dance of flying weapons, converging from all directions on Lu Yi with unrelenting intent. Urged by the throes of necessity, Lu Yi found himself compelled to suppress the burgeoning urge for bloodshed. He gracefully maneuvered his form, evading the onslaught of attacks directed his way. In this tempestuous moment, a symphony of metallic resonance erupted from the scabbard at his waist, and with an almost ethereal flourish, 9 resplendent flying weapons took flight. The scene unfolded into a disarray of chaos, as even more New Moon sect acolytes were roused into hastening towards the epicenter of turmoil from all other corners of the outpost. A medical cultivator hastened to Tan Li's side to inspect the extent of his injuries, tending to him with practiced hands. The legate of the New Moon sect outpost himself bellowed with a thunderous proclamation, "How dare you, Lu Yi? You're a Cloud River Realm cultivator. How dare you come in here and impose your martial superiority on us? Do you truly believe that we of the New Moon sect are afraid of you? I know. You must have suffered being attacked by my brother, that's why you're here. Do you expect to find grandeur from subduing lessers like us? How shameless you are!" Tan Li had expected as much when Lu Yi mentioned his elder brother earlier. The inquiry had stirred enough shadow of speculation for Tan Li to guess most if not all of the truth accurately. Otherwise, why would the annihilator of sects come all the way here, of all places, to the New Moon sect's outpost? Accompanying the timbre of his wrathful retort, an anguished cry unexpectedly pierced the tumultuous air. Diverse in their ranks of cultivation, the New Moon sect defenders were a ragtag and variegated ensemble of inept lackeys when Lu Yi had enough experience of dealing with enemies that well outnumbered him. He had traversed enough perils on his journey that the crucible of such adversity no longer felt unfamiliar to him. Serpentine in his movement, Lu Yi relied on glyph protection while he maintained his own onslaught until a momentary lapse caught one of the New Moon sect acolytes off guard. With a vicious stroke of precision, Lu Ye's flying weapons descended upon him like a hawk finding prey, cutting him down with a macabre downpour in its wake. His fury unbridled, and enraged Tan Li screamed, "You dare spill blood here?" Never in his wildest dreams could Tan Li have fathomed that Lu Yi would dare incur the wrath of heaven's retribution by spilling blood here in the Spirit Creek battlefield. True enough, with a single life now extinguished on his account, a pulsating violet luminescence suffused Lu Ye's countenance. More than that, it actually was an assembly of amorphous violet arcs coursing through him. The corners of Lu Ye's twitched at the recognition of what it was, the judgment of the heavens. Painful. Very painful. He could recount an anthology of injuries, minor and grievous alike, with a few besetting him to the precipice of unconsciousness. However, never before had he tolerated any agony of this caliber. The judgment of the heavens wrought anguish not solely upon his physical body, but also on his very essence too. It was as if a legion of ants were gnawing ravenously upon his body and spirit, a feast that subjected him to a maelstrom of torment indescribable. Chapter 538. Not much longer. A Cloud River cultivator going back to the Spirit Creek battlefield to pick on his lessers was hardly Lu Ye's idea of something honorable. But if Tan Xing had triumphed over Lu Yi solely due to his own power and ability, Lu Yi could hardly fault him for that. The latter would have blamed himself and instead just focused on his own progress and development to pave his way for future retribution. But Tan Xing's cunning use of the tracking disc's second function had rendered Lu Yi completely exposed, which later culminated in how he was cornered and surrounded by virtually every Thousand Demon Ridge cultivator in the Carnage Coliseum. If that did not happen, then he would not have used up the immensely valuable Golden Body token and his painstakingly gathered 100,000 contribution points. For this he blamed Tan Xing. Fully, and the tangled path of payback was what led Lu Yi to the doorstep of the New Moon sect. At the same time, it was also meant as a declaration, an unspoken challenge that since they failed to kill him, then the storm of his reprisal would be a tempest to reckon with. An aura of amethyst lightning enfolded Lu Yi at his first kill. Heaven's retribution had spared no time at all to punish him for that transgression, and the pain was a harrowing ordeal, an agony unparalleled. He had been anticipating how painful it would be prior to coming here. But clearly he had underestimated the torment. If the taking of a single life could be this painful, then what about killing tens or even hundreds of them? By Lu Ye's own reckoning, 5 or 6 lives, that must be his limit. Any more beyond that would kill him, or at least he would be paralyzed due to the intense agony. The New Moon sect outpost here might not have been garrisoned by too large a force, but Lu Yi estimated at least 100 or 200 men strong. But confronting such odds, if he could only kill just 5 or 6 of them, made his mission nigh impossible. A sudden anomaly rippled forth from inside his spiritual self and interrupted his thoughts. That was when the anguish that once gripped both his flesh and psyche dulled as if eased by an otherworldly touch. Lu Ye's heart quivered as he maintained his evasion, weaving around amidst the barrage of attacks raining on him, while part of him ventured into his spiritual self to investigate the source of this intriguing disturbance. With his inner sight, he beheld his tree of glyphs, now awash in a cascade of transcendental flames. The very tree seemed to have burst into an inferno, flames ascending in serpentine fervor, incinerating the oppressive shroud of ominous, ashen mist that was engulfing his essence. The amethyst lightning that coiled around his arms and limbs dissipated before his eyes. The tree of glyphs possessed the power to incinerate the judgment of the heavens. The unexpected revelation elicited a chorus of astonishment from Lu Yi. Upon introspection, however, the pieces fit. Everything made sense. The tree of glyphs had been proven adept at purifying any intruding elements detrimental to its host, the toxins from the ingestion of spirit pills, for example. It stood to reason then that given the requisite fuel, The tree's ethereal flames could render Lu Yi impervious to many forms of harm. The judgment of the heavens, although retribution ordained by a divine force beyond evasion, shared a similar nature with toxins, an element invasive to his being, harmful in nature. Thus, the tree of glyphs could incinerate the judgment of the heavens as well. However, the magnitude of incinerating the judgment of the heavens clearly eclipsed that of ordinary toxins, which would incur a greater cost in terms of spiritual fuel. In mere moments, a refreshing change swept over Lu Ye's form, a sensation akin to weightlessness pervading his being. The iridescent shroud of amethyst lightning bolts that once enveloped him now danced away, vanishing like mist. He had reservations initially about excessive bloodshed because of the judgment of the heavens. Therefore, his original intention had been to eliminate only a select few to intimidate the rest of the New Moon sect into submission. But now that he discovered that the Tree of Glyphs could vanquish even the judgment of the heavens, such apprehensions had now dissolved into nothingness. All 9 flying weapons flowed and interwove with renewed deadliness augmented by glyphs, eclipsing the performance witnessed mere moments before. Another chorus of anguished cries pierced the air with more slain enemies spilling blood as they plummeted from the air. The fading amethyst lightning once again enshrouded Lu Yi, its luminescent presence snaking all around him. A still heavily injured Tan Li was screaming at the top of his voice, "Do you have a death wish, Lu Yi? How dare you?" Seeing his men being cut down right before his very eyes was a painful loss, but if Lu Yi were to go on killing like this, the latter would just be digging his own grave. The deaths of the defenders would have been worth it if Lu Yi were to die, assuming he did not escape. With that in mind, Tan Li roared to his men, "Don't let him escape. The judgment is killing him." The New Moon sect cultivators were panicking and balking at Lu Yi being able to so easily slay them despite the superiority of numbers. None of them would dare to gamble away their own life, especially seeing how brutal and savage Lu Yi was. But witnessing the burgeoning intensity of the amethyst lightning enveloping Lu Yi and hearing the rousing command of their legate Tan Li reignited their valor. With the radiant dance of his flying weapons and the cascading glimmers of inviolable slicing at every enemy around him, Lu Yi weaved through the adversarial throng with the grace of a butterfly. Wherever his presence touched, torrents of violence erupted, painting the surroundings with an unsettling hue of carnage and turmoil. The silhouettes of slain New Moon sect acolytes tumbled to the ground like autumn leaves, their final descent a poignant dance of surrender to death. Even Lu Yi found it arduous to repel every enemy attack as a lone invader contending against an entire sect. Fortunately, there was glyph protection to shield his vulnerabilities, causing any blows that struck him to at most inflict superficial wounds. More so, with his remarkable physique that rivaled even the stoutest body-tempering cultivators of the same cultivation rank. But at the same time, for anyone who took a blow from Lu Yi, it wouldn't be a matter of mere injury, it would be a question of life or death. Acolyte after acolyte fell in battle, and Lu Yi was a violet bolt of lightning of death, zigzagging through the expanse with piles of dead in his wake. Finally, one of them finally broke under the mounting strain and cried out, "Brother Tan, there's no way we'll defeat him." The entire outpost would have scoffed with disbelief at the notion of a single individual being able to face off against the full complement of an outpost's defenses alone. Yet, at this very moment, this inexplicable phenomenon was taking place right before their very eyes. And to think that the individual in question would be none other than the annihilator of sects Lu Yi himself, now wreaking havoc and carnage despite being afflicted by the judgment of the heavens. Tan Li's gaze reddened with bloodshot intensity as he witnessed his fellow acolytes falling one after another, the heartache within him growing unbearably suffocating. But they had come this far. To recall his men and concede their losses would be nothing but condemning all the deaths and sacrifices into vain and needless futility. The violet lightning enveloping Lu Ye's form had grown so concentrated it became an indissoluble maelstrom. Surely the annihilator of sects himself must be enduring unimaginable torment and anguish himself? He cannot withstand the judgment much longer. We must hold on. Roared Tan Li. Lu Ye's resilience had all but surpassed his expectations. Tanli had initially assumed that Lu Yi could at most claim a few lives, yet, up until now, the toll exacted by the savage craft and hands of the annihilator of sex had surged to nearly 30. In one fell swoop, more than 2/10 of the outpost's less than 200-man-strong force were killed. Such a grievous toll. Tanli dreaded how he would explain the losses to the leadership of the sect if he failed to apprehend Lu Yi here. In the meantime, the rest of the outpost's defenders gritted their teeth with resolve at the command of their legate, maintaining their assault on Lu Yi head-on despite the trepidation weighing on them. Nevertheless, Lu Yi looked hardly encumbered by the pain of the judgment of the heavens. On the contrary, he grew bolder with each enemy he slew. At every swing of his weapon, men would drop dead on the ground. The medical cultivator tending to Tan Li's wound broke his silence all of a sudden. "I've heard about the Battle of Golden Tip, Brother Tan Li. There was this true Lake Realm cultivator of the Crimson Blood sect who entered this battlefield back then, and in that battle, she alone killed many dozens of our people." Tan Li swiftly turned his head, his pupils suffused with crimson intensity. "What are you trying to say?" The medical cultivator continued, "I am not sure of the effects of the judgment of the heavens, but it is said that not even a divine ocean realm cultivator could withstand its punitive torment. By all rights, Lu Yi should have long been incapacitated by now. Yet even with the judgment gnawing on him, he doesn't seem to be affected much. Does that suggest that the Crimson Blood sect have some unknown methods that allow them to evade the effects of the judgment?" "Impossible!" Tan Li dismissed flatly. "This is the punishment inflicted by the heavens. It's impervious to any mortal manipulation." "But what if there really is some way to do just that?" Tan Li's expression drifted into a momentary trance. Indeed, what if there really is some sort of trick for that? So many had died and so long had elapsed, yet Lu Yi looked fine. If he really was being subjected to the agony of the judgment of the heavens, then the pain should have been enough to reduce him to full paralysis because of the pain, if not outright death. There was Lu Yi, the paragon of death and destruction now, defying the ravages of the judgment with an eerie calmness that betrayed no hint of pain or distress. Could it be true that the Crimson Blood sect does indeed possess some arcane methods to elude the retribution of the heavens themselves? If that were true, then that would indeed be a perplexing enigma of the highest order. The heavens have always been an arbiter of impartiality. Yet why would it seem to favor the Crimson Blood sect so much? "Sir," implored the medical cultivator, his words flowing with concern, "it might be imprudent to wager the lives of our men just to ascertain this enigma." Tan Li jerked himself back into focus. His men, his comrades and his fellow acolytes, were all charging at Lu Yi, not because they believed they could defeat the latter, but rather in the belief of his assertion that Lu Yi would eventually crumble under the strain of the judgment of the heavens. But if Lu Yi could indeed emerge from the torment of the judgment of the heavens unscathed, then all the deaths of his men would be for nothing. Conviction crystallized within Tan Li's mind. He leaped to his feet, roaring with unshakable determination, "Sound the retreat! Back to Jianghu!" His decree thundered, impelling the defenders to back off Lu Yi and began filing straight for the outpost's sanctum of providence. Even they had begun to notice that Lu Yi wasn't affected by the judgment of heavens. Lu Yi was about to chase after them, but Tan Li's towering form materialized in a collision course with him, screaming, "Your opponent is me, Lu Yi. Let them be!" A maelstrom of spiritual power and vital essence surged within Tan Li's being, infusing his very form with an unnatural hue of crimson, emanating a primal and bestial aura resembling that of a rampaging beast, an untamable force of nature both formidable and insolent. Lu Yi remained steadfast, his stance resolute as he lifted inviolable, its gleaming edge cleaving through the air in a sequence of 3 lightning-quick strokes. 3 crescent-like arcs of ethereal radiance bore down upon Tan Li, who met the onslaught with arms outstretched in staunch resistance. The resonant echoes of impact reverberated, and grievous wounds so terrible that one could almost see the white of his bones peeking out of the grotesque flesh marred his forearms. His impetuous charge was halted in its tracks. Before he even came to his senses, a shadow shrouded in violet blotted his sight of everything else. A blinding dance of gleaming steel ensued, and Tan Li froze as if suspended in time. Lu Yi deftly swept past the petrified form of Tan Li, in hot pursuit of the rest of the New Moon sect, cutting down anyone within his line of sight and leaving a trail of blood and dead bodies leading to the outpost's sanctum of providence. Behind him, stultified despair enshrouded Tang Li's gaze as life ebbed from him. His once formidable form crashed to the ground with his head rolling off his shoulder even before he hit the earth. Despite being equal in rank with Lu Yi, he could not even withstand one round of attacks from the latter. With the dust of battle now finally settling, Lu Yi stood alone in the sanctum of providence. He flicked the bloodstains from Inviolable before returning it to its scabbard. Most of the New Moon sect outpost had been evacuated. Lu Yi came alone and there was only so much he could do. But given the circumstances, the outcome had turned out to be acceptable. Lu Yi stepped out of the sanctum of providence and approached the headless corpse of Tan Li. His hand rummaged around, fumbling for a brief moment before extracting the control gem of the defensive ward. He destroyed it, and with it, the defensive ward that guarded the outpost faded. Only then did he convey a message to Yi to bring forth Tao Jianghu. Chapter 539, All That for Nothing. When Tao Jianghu and Yi rendezvoused with Lu Yi at the New Moon sect outpost, little did they realize that they would be beholding a scene that would be etched into the fabric of his memory for the rest of his lifetime. Corpse after gruesome corpse lay scattered upon the blood-spattered flagstones on the floor, their positions twisted and chaotic. The blood stains on the ground painted a macabre canvas that depicted how savage was the earlier skirmish, a morbid trail of red and dismembered limbs that led straight to the forecourt of the New Moon sect's sanctum of providence. Upon the steps of the sanctum of providence was a solitary figure sitting there, leaning in a casual recline with an air of nonchalance and a saber lying beside him. A serpent of violet lightning was slithering all over him, crackling in its serpentine dance. Watching how the amethyst lightning was gnawing at the physique of the person gave Tao Jianghu a disconcerting discomfort. It was nigh impossible to fathom the torment one would endure within the embrace of such a thunderous hue. Beyond the shadow of the sanctum's edifice, deep inside its recesses, a miasma of crimson malevolence hung heavy, where no less than a score of lifeless corpses lay amassed. The New Moon sect outpost sat right inside the core regions of the battlefield, a place where every cultivator was at least a ninth order if not higher. Yet, these practitioners who once held dominion over heights, in Tao Jianghu's eyes, now lay dead within the pool of their own blood, their warmth steadily fading. Tao Jianghu could have sworn that he counted at least 50 dead bodies. When his eyes set upon the person seated upon the steps, Tao Jianghu was overcome by such a crippling sensation as if he was gazing upon a towering mountain summit that stretched beyond the clouds overhead, a height that he would never, ever, be able to scale. This was Lu Yi, the fifth acolyte of the Crimson Blood sect, his senior brother. Months ago, he had made history when he single-handedly tamed every Thousand Demon Ridge sect and order through his savage might. It wasn't until he ascended into the Cloud River realm that they rejoiced and celebrated with unbridled elation. But who would have guessed that the most feared annihilator of sects would revisit the Spirit Creek battlefield after just a 3-month absence, only to lay waste to the outpost of a major Thousand Demon Ridge sect? Tao Jianghu climbed the steps and greeted, "Brother Lu Yi." "Go," motioned Lu Yi, "go inside and do your thing." "Yes, sir," answered Tao Jianghu, knowing full well why he was brought here. He stepped inside the sanctum of providence and with his credentials as legate of the Crimson Blood sect outpost, he stripped the divine opportunity column of the New Moon sect outpost of all its blessings. This was his first time, but it wasn't hard. All it took were a couple of tries and Tao Jianghu easily got the hang of it. He placed before Lu Yi the storage bags she had gathered from the dead bodies she had ransacked. With a worrisome tone she asked, "Are you all right, Lu Yi?" The judgment of the heavens was anathema to the human soul, and spiritual entities like Yi would find themselves affected greatly just by being near it. Even a glance was enough to induce a sense of vertigo in her. "I am fine," Lu Yi responded casually. With the tree of glyphs consuming the invasive judgment of the heavens, he felt rather well. Even the pain felt relatively tolerable. If anything, he was more bothered by the loss of his contribution points, which was a 2,000-point deficit. The heavens' rewarding of contribution points clearly took him for a Cloud River Realm 3rd Order, even though his rank would remain at the Heaven 9 stage for as long as he stayed here in the Spirit Creek battlefield. And as a Cloud River Realm cultivator, every kill would not win him points, but rather a deduction of his contribution points. What a huge loss it had been. He had come here seeking remediations for the losses he had sustained, but instead of gaining points, he was losing more points. But he had collected enough loot and storage bags from the enemies he had slain to make up for the deficit. Lu Yi stuffed a few spirit pills into his mouth to recuperate while he took the time to undo the magical seals that held the storage bags. Nevertheless, there was little to be expected of the loot he had collected from cultivators who were still of the Spirit Creek realm. Even Tan Li's, a Heaven 9 cultivator, hardly fared better. Lu Yi finally finished undoing the magical seals of his booty. That took approximately half an hour, revealing nothing that might have dazzled him nor stirred his heart. Tao Jianghu, having deftly purloined every blessing he could get his hands on from the New Moon Sect's Divine Opportunity column, emerged from the Sanctum of Providence with an air of invigoration. He strode towards Lu Yi and asked, "Where to after this, Brother Lu?" Lu Yi carefully stowed away his plunder, not forgetting to stuff a few spirit pills and stones into a separate storage bag which he tossed to Tao Jianghu, saying, "Gimme a minute." He spun on his heels and headed into the Sanctum of Providence, whereupon he reached the foot of the Divine Opportunity column. He extended a hand and touched the Divine Obelisk, and entered the Vault of Providence, selling his loot there in exchange for contribution points. That brought his contribution points tally up to 7,000. Without the faintest hint of hesitation, he proceeded to convert all accrued points into buying flames of earthen spirits. The reason was simple enough. The tree of glyph appeared to have been fully drained of its fuel, and swift replenishment was imperative. Or else, the judgment of the heavens would go on inflicting its damage on him, which could encumber his plans. The consumption of the tree of glyph's fuel in eradicating the effects of the judgment of the heavens far exceeded that of venomous toxins. Whether there was still enough fuel for the tree or not, Li did not know. But what he did know was that a small portion of the sustenance for the tree was always stockpiled as reserve whenever the tree was to unlock new glyphs. The only time when the tree of glyph had fully run out of sustenance was during the Battle of Golden Tip. He was still a very lowly Spirit Creek realm cultivator at the time, and he did not have enough contribution points, which was how the tree's sustenance became fully expended at the time. But since he began acquiring flames of earthen spirits from the Vault of Providence, his tree of glyphs was never short of sustenance. Until now, which was the second time this happened. The tree of glyphs devoured one flame of earthen spirits after another like a starving wolf as the vast expanses of smoky ash ignited billowed. Still, the violet thunderbolts crackling all over him showed no sign of diminishing. Over 50 lives had been taken by him, and in the aftermath, the growing effect of the judgment of the heavens because of their deaths was poised to take a lot of flames of earthen spirits to fully eradicate. But what astonished Lu Yi the most was how the tree of glyphs refused to exhibit any reaction no matter how many flames of earthen spirits he had consumed. He could only surmise that the tree must have perceived his precarious circumstance and was focusing on removing the judgment's effects above all else. With himself now beleaguered by the judgment's effects, the flames were clearly being used by the tree as fuel to combat the judgment's effects, not to unlock any more new glyphs. In mere moments, the flames he exchanged from the Vault of Providence for over 7,000 contribution points were fully consumed, the boughs of the tree of glyphs now shrouded by an unceasingly thick smog that refused to dissipate. A brief half-hour later, the tree of glyphs lay dormant, its leaves unmoving, and its reservoir of fuel once more completely depleted. Still, the arcing electricity of the judgment of heavens persisted in its vibrant shade of purple upon Lu Yi, its vigor undiminished. All that for nothing. What a loss. A flicker danced at the corner of Lu Ye's eye, a telltale sign of his inner turmoil. His initial plan to seek restitution from the New Moon sect for the losses he had sustained at first had ended up with even more contribution points bleeding away. Instead, with every kill he took and trying to eradicate the judgment of the heavens had cost him a huge load of points too. Instead of regaining points, the hole was only just getting bigger and bigger, much to his dismay. But if he were to take into account the blessing Tao Jianghu reaped from the enemy outpost, the balance undoubtedly swayed in favor of profit. Nevertheless, being a Cloud River realm cultivator, any good for the outpost here was no longer relevant to him. The blessings Tao Jianghu plundered would be good for the rest of the outpost and not him, not even a modicum of benefit at all for him. Lu Yi delved into the confines of his storage sphere once more. He had amassed a considerable trove of spoils since he entered the Cloud River battlefield, and he had not been able to find time to sort everything out. His original intention had been to go through the massive heaps of booty the next time he visited a Divine Trade Association branch. But no time for that now. He was in dire need of contribution points. Once again, he re-entered the Vault of Providence where he sifted through every item and sold everything that was useless, keeping only some spirit pills and stones that could be useful in the future. That at least brought in a haul of over 10,000 contribution points, enough for him to purchase more flames of earthen spirits to be used as fuel for the Tree of Glyphs. Amidst his preoccupations in his work, a solitary piece of news took flight within the real world of Jianghu, spreading with alacrity as it reached every major order and sect within the Thousand Demon Ridge Coalition. After just 3 months, the annihilator of sects Lu Yi had resurfaced in the Spirit Creek battlefield once more. As if his re-emergence was not bad enough, the harbinger of terror for all Thousand Demon Ridge cultivators here had made a beeline for the outpost of the New Moon sect, which he conquered single-handedly. In the aftermath, the outpost was laid to waste with more than 50 dead or maimed, including the legate Tan Li, who was found later with his head unceremoniously lopped off. The news took the entire Thousand Demon Ridge coalition by storm. Many, especially those of the New Moon sect, uttered the name Lu Yi with disgust and rage, believing that Lu Yi did not belong here in the Spirit Creek battlefield, much less oppressing cultivators lesser than him. If only they could enter the Spirit Creek battlefield and challenge Lu Yi themselves, thought the true Lake and Divine Ocean realm elites of the Thousand Demon Ridge. But yowling expletives and curses was pretty much all they could do. None of them truly had the courage to take on Lu Yez in the Spirit Creek battlefield. All it would take was one single loss against Lu Yi and they would become the subject of mockery throughout the entire battlefield. At any rate, the enormous losses suffered by the New Moon sect, the deaths of its younger crop of cultivators, the sacking of its outpost, and also the plunder of its blessings, would not be redressed by just rebuilding the outpost alone. Back when Lu Yi had demanded all Thousand Demon Ridge outposts for payment in return for not attacking them, the New Moon sect outpost had offered up their riches as well in its bid to sue for peace. Yet why did Lu Yi come back here wreaking havoc after receiving payment? The high echelons of the Crescent Moon sect assembled all surviving members of the outpost at once, seeking to unravel the motive of Lu Yi's sudden invasion. Soon, a vital thread emerged, the mention of Tan Xing by Lu Yi during the invasion earlier. The latter had been claiming how he wanted to repay Tan Xing's kindness to him during their encounter at the Cloud River battlefield. Yet, beneath this veneer laid irony. One could barely expect any kindness between Tan Xing and Lu Yi if they were to encounter each other, since they both belonged to two opposing factions. But that was enough for the leadership of the New Moon sect to guess that the clue of Lu Yi's sudden hostility must lie with Tan Xing. To that end, they immediately ordered men to enter the Cloud River battlefield to reach out for more information. News poured in swiftly enough. Apparently, during the last occurrence of the Carnage Coliseum phenomenon in the Cloud River battlefield, both Tan Xing and Lu Yi were caught inside it, and in his bid to win the first place in the Carnage roster, Tan Xing had employed the use of a tracking disc. That culminated in an all-out manhunt by almost every Thousand Demon Ridge elite in the Carnage Coliseum that nearly sealed Lu Yi's demise. That forced Lu Yi into using a precious gold body token, and the costly summoning of a divine opportunity column right after the Colosseum ended to narrowly elude his doom. A gold body token, a magical item of immense and incredible rarity, and a divine opportunity column that would take 100,000 contribution points to summon. That finally impressed upon the New Moon sect about Lu Yi's motive, a clear act of retribution. If anything, the sect only had Tanxing's failure to decisively put Lu Yi to death once and for all to blame. A mistake that clearly had sowed the seeds of peril back then. It did not take long for the rest of the Thousand Demon Ridge to realize what just happened and why. Word of what took place inside the Carnage Coliseum spread swiftly. All of the Thousand Demon Ridge could only marvel in awe at Lu Yi's stupendous fortune for finding such a coveted treasure in the gold body token. Without it, there was no way that Lu Yi could have survived such impossible odds back then. Judging from the timing, Lu Yi appeared to have re-entered the Spirit Creek battlefield right after leaving the Cloud River battlefield, an unequivocal embodiment of unrelenting vendetta, taken to the extreme. Chapter 540, next. But the rest of the Thousand Demon Ridge couldn't care less about the aftermath of the attack and the New Moon sect's indignation. If anything, they were more concerned about Lu Yi's present condition. His return to the Spirit Creek battlefield and subsequent conquering of an enemy outpost might sound like the sort of daring-do that could someday be written into some glorious paean, but Lu Yi was a Cloud River realm cultivator nonetheless, and the heavens' retribution had and always been merciless and unyielding. And in the midst of this turmoil, Lu Yi had claimed over 50 lives, although it was rumored that once the relentless slaughter ended, the purple lightning coiling around him seemed to have materialized enough that it looked very real. It was so real that it looked incredibly dangerous and ominous. But if the destructive force of the judgment of the heavens was truly so fearsome, surely that would mean the demise of Lu Yi? If such were the case, the New Moon sect could at least bask in the glory of their accomplishment, in spite of the magnitude of their losses. The unrest Lu Yi had sown caused enough unrest in the Spirit Creek battlefield for every Thousand Demon Ridge cultivator to feel panic and terrified at the mere mention of his name. Yet even when he had gone into the Cloud River battlefield, he miraculously eluded the grasp of enemies far more powerful and deadlier than him, despite his relatively low cultivation rank there. That illustrated one truth. If such talent were to be allowed to mature, then Lu Yi would undoubtedly spell disaster for all of the Thousand Demon Ridge in the future. But if the judgment of the heavens could kill him, then this would be a cause for celebration for them all. Multitudes of messages were dispatched to the New Moon sect, beseeching them to send some men into the Spirit Creek battlefield to ascertain Lu Yi's fate. Everyone needed to know whether he lived or perished. But the New Moon sect responded with a firm refusal, finding the messages nothing but unfounded requests. Sending anyone back to the New Moon sect outpost, where Lu Yi might still be present, would be extremely dangerous. The sect couldn't afford to risk more lives just to accommodate the requests of bystanders who had nothing to lose. During the Carnage Coliseum, Tanxing was not the only enemy cultivator who had given Lu Yi enough hell to want payback. However, the origins of the conflict undeniably traced back to him. Now that their outpost had been overrun and the acolytes there slain, the New Moon sect could do nothing else but acknowledge their involvement in the offense. Yet, given Lu Yi's unstoppable and enraged rampage, his thirst for vengeance surely extended beyond the New Moon sect. Each and every Thousand Demon Ridge sect, an order that stood behind the elite cultivators who were part in Lu Yi's torment during the Carnage Coliseum, had to answer for their involvement. None would escape this reckoning. This revelation sent tremors through the hearts of many Thousand Demon Ridge sections. They hastily dispatched acolytes into the Cloud River battlefield to gather intelligence, wanting to find out who was amongst those who had participated in the attack on Lu Yi, and whether the throng included any of their own. However, communication between the Cloud River battlefield and the real world of Jianghu was not as convenient as that of the Spirit Creek battlefield, rendering much of the information elusive. The duration of the wait for confirmed news remained uncertain. Furthermore, Lu Yi was undoubtedly in trouble due to the judgment of the heavens. Even if he survived, he would likely lack the strength to launch any more attacks. To that end, the leadership of the other Thousand Demon Ridge sects and orders believed that the situation may not be as dire as the New Moon sect's report suggested. Nevertheless, it was imperative to ascertain Lu Yi's status. Such matters could not be taken lightly. Hence, some of the Thousand Demon Ridge outposts near the New Moon sect promptly dispatched men to investigate the situation. In the meantime, somewhere within the Cloud River battlefield, Tan Xing, clad in azure robes, was grieving with tears from eyes scarlet from his rage rolling down his cheeks. He had just received word from his order's stronghold in Jianghu, informing him of the events in the Spirit Creek battlefield. Tan Xing clasped his fists tightly, silently vowing to himself that he would not rest until he had confronted Lu Yi, a solemn pledge he intended to fulfill in this lifetime. From his perspective, targeting Lu Yi during the Carnage Coliseum was not a misjudgment. His mistake lay in failing to exterminate Lu Yi once and for all, allowing him to slip through his fingers. What's even more unfathomable was that Lu Yi would brazenly slip back inside the Spirit Creek battlefield to exact revenge, leading to the tragic deaths of his own junior acolytes, including his blood sibling at the hands of Lu Yi. If their prior interactions had merely been a clash of factions, this has now intensified into a real vendetta. A blood feud that demanded retribution. At the Ninth Order of the Cloud River realm, and after gaining considerable advantages from his adventures in the Carnage Coliseum, Tan Xing's initial plan was to advance into the True Lake realm within a month. However, given the current circumstances, his ascension would be meaningless without avenging his fellow acolytes of the New Moon sect. In the face of this deep-seated bitterness and rancor, he pledged to exhaust every resource in his quest to slay Lu Yi first. Back inside the Spirit Creek battlefield, Lu Yi was lounging casually on the steps leading into the New Moon sect outpost's Sanctum of Providence. The purple lightning bolts that once snaked all around him had mostly dissipated. Right now, he was responding to messages sent to him by several close allies. Word about his return had somehow spread, and many within the Spirit Creek battlefield were now aware of his presence here and his successful invasion of the New Moon sect outpost. Filled with a sudden spurt of zeal and enthusiasm, the legates and prolegates of various allied sects and orders were reaching out to him, inquiring if he needed assistance. Lu Yi harked back to the time when he was leading a crusade of Grand Sky Coalition allies that not only laid waste to a number of enemy outposts but also brought those who were part of the crusade substantial gains. Such conveniences were no more since many of his allies had entered the inner circle areas of the Spirit Creek battlefield themselves during his ascension into the Cloud River realm. Now, with his return, many were becoming restless, yearning for an encore. Some were concerned about his well-being, given his significant body count and the damage caused by the judgment of the heavens. Lu Yi responded to each message one by one, which took quite some time to address them all. But to Lu Yi, if members of the Grand Sky Coalition were concerned about his condition, it was likely that the Thousand Demon Ridge would be even more interested to know how he was at the moment, although there was no way to predict how they would react once they confirmed that he was still all and well. From a personal perspective, the assault on the New Moon sect's outpost had been costly, with nearly 20,000 contribution points invested in the endeavor. But the Crimson Blood sect had undoubtedly profited from the successful invasion. Just the blessings that Jianghu had stripped from the enemy outpost already worth more than 2,000 contribution points. Nevertheless, leaving aside the merits reaped from their spoils, the primary satisfaction came from venting pent-up frustration. Lifting up his weapon, Lu Yi beckoned at Jianghu, who had been waiting with the patience and obedience comparable to that of a butler. "Let's go. On to the next one." Back then, he was besieged by so many enemy cultivators that it was impossible for him to possibly know which Thousand Demon Ridge sect or order were all of his assailants from. All he could remember were the New Moon sect and the Clouded Sun clan, where Tan Xing and Wei Ke were from respectively. Tan Xing was the source of the whole debacle, which is why Lu Yi chose to attack the New Moon sect first. Meanwhile, Wei Ke was the biggest instigator and the fiercest nemesis on his tail all the time. So he was placed second. But Lu Yi couldn't kill as many people as he did at the New Moon sect outpost anymore. He had already sold off all his spoils of war, and still, his reserves of fuel for the Tree of Glyph were running low. Nevertheless, Lu Yi believed that there was a good chance that the Clouded Sun clan would make a wise decision to not step into the same shoes as the New Moon sect. As for the others, it didn't matter which sect or order they came from. Of all the 1,000 Demon Ridge sects and orders with outposts in the central regions of the Spirit Creek battlefield, Lu Yi would just treat them the same. With the precedent last time, Lu Yi had a good feeling that they would know what to do to prevent his wrath. Anyone who refused to submit to his demands for protection money, Lu Yi would be more than happy to make examples out of them, just like the New Moon sect. As for the notion of conquering every single 1,000 Demon Ridge outpost in the battlefield, Lu Yi would not go that far yet. He did not try something as drastic as that back when he was still the most powerful cultivator here at the Heaven 9 stage, hence there was no reason to do it now. With their outposts razed to the ground, the surviving enemy cultivators would find themselves without shelter. The gravity of the situation would have been less dire if this affected only a couple of 1,000 Demon Ridge factions. However, if all the 1,000 Demon Ridge cultivators in the central regions of the battlefield were to simultaneously lose their outposts, the situation would spiral out of control. With nothing to lose, the surviving enemy cultivators could band as one and form a force potent enough to go on a rampage of their own, systematically assaulting every Grand Sky Coalition outpost they encounter, one by one. Therefore, while Lu Yi undoubtedly possessed the means to rid the battlefield of any 1,000 Demon Ridge outpost, he absolutely must refrain from doing just that, for doing so would only bring boundless calamity to the rest of the Grand Sky Coalition members within the battlefield. There had been an order that had endured in the Spirit Creek battlefield for so long, a balance that if broken or disrupted, would only bring more harm than good. In contrast to notions that would only grant fleeting gratification, Lu Yi was more inclined to secure tangible gains by treading with careful deliberation. He consulted his map and discovered that the Clouded Sun Clan outpost was unexpectedly nearer to the New Moon sect than he expected. With his speed, he could reach it in less than half a day. Lu Yi rode on his magical conveyance. He took into the air, just in time to see ribbons of streaking flashes appearing on the horizon. That must be cultivators approaching, although he could not yet tell if they were friend or foe. And from the looks of things, they appeared to have spotted him. Yet they continued their approach, their greater seemingly washing away any wariness or apprehension towards his presence. At a distance of over 10 miles away, the group continued to fly, exchanging words as they traveled across the air. Surely that's not Lu Yi, Brother Miao? That fellow seems to be coming from the direction of the New Moon sect's outpost, said one of them. Don't overthink it, responded the one the approaching cultivators referred to as Brother Miao. Lu Yi is here inside the Spirit Creek battlefield as a Cloud River Realm cultivator. After killing so many, he must be afflicted by the judgment of heavens by now. That stranger bears not a trace of any purplish lightning. I don't think that's Lu Yi, he must be just a passerby. True, the other nodded in agreement. We're approaching the New Moon sect's outpost. Stay vigilant, everyone, cautioned Brother Miao, issuing a solemn command. Lu Yi is a ruthless killer and a formidable adversary of all 1,000 Demon Ridge cultivators. Our mission is solely to gather intelligence, not engage him in combat. If anything happens, withdraw at once. This is not a time to worry about face. Yes, sir, they all replied in unison. They were under orders from the leadership of their sect to come to the New Moon sect's outpost to investigate Lu Ye's situation, and none of them were expecting to meet face-to-face with the very quarry they had been charged to surveil. With the substantial distance still between them, there was no way they could recognize him either. It wasn't until they were less than 3 miles apart that Miao furrowed his brow as he scrutinized the incoming stranger. With them moving as a group, they saw no need to veer away. Yet despite being outnumbered, the stranger did not choose to alter his course as well, much to Miao's surprise. It was common for the side with weaker strength or lesser number to avoid potential confrontation whenever cultivators encountered each other in the wilderness without prior knowledge of each other's allegiances. That was why Miao was incredulous as to the stranger's boldness. He lifted his gaze and carefully observed. That was when his figure turned petrified as if suspended in midair. For 1 second, Miao nearly thought that his senses were deceiving him. But it was true. He looked again, and there it was, their intended target for this reconnaissance mission, Lu Yi himself. Shocked, he cried, "Impossible!" As he had said earlier, Lu Yi had killed so many people that even if he survived, he would undoubtedly be afflicted by the judgment of heavens. He could barely fathom the possibility that the stranger approaching them could be Lu Yi himself. And there was no sign of any purplish electric bolts enveloping his body. It was as if the killings that he had committed here in the Spirit Creek battlefield had gone unpunished. That would have compelled Miao into thinking that he must be mistaken. This must be just someone else whose appearance resembled Lu Yi. Yet what about the presence of that small, snow-white feline perching on his shoulder? Who else could it be if not Lu Yi? Plus, he clearly was coming from the direction of the New Moon Sect outpost. The distance between them had now fallen to just 2 miles. Chapter 541, Old Rules. Run! Senior brother Miao shouted as his thoughts raced. His few junior brothers and sisters looked puzzled. The person who had just spoken prior asked tentatively, "Senior brother Miao?" "That's Yi." Senior brother Miao summoned his spirit artifact as he spoke, assuming a defensive posture. It was clear that he intended to stay behind and buy time for his junior brothers and sisters so they could escape. One had to admit that as a senior brother, he was truly quite responsible. Their faces turned pale at the mention of that name, and for a while, they were at a loss for what to do. It was just a man's name, yet its shadow was as tall as that of a tree. Lu Yi was relatively unknown in the Cloud River battlefield, but in the Spirit Creek battlefield, it would not be an exaggeration to say that everyone knew him, especially after the astonishing feat he accomplished at the New Moon Sect's outpost, where he single-handedly broke through the defenses of a Core Circle Sect's outpost and slew over 50 people. Such remarkable achievements would leave a great impact on anyone. Who would have thought that they would encounter this plague when they came to the New Moon Sect's outpost to gather information? In their brief hesitation, it was already too late to escape. Yi's figure was already less than 1,000 meters away. "Watch for my eye signals," Senior brother Miao shouted while circulating his spiritual power. The others also felt a sense of imminent danger and hurriedly brought out their spirit artifacts, standing behind senior brother Miao as if to back him up. A short while later, Lu Yi flew past them at a distance of less than 300 meters, heading straight ahead. Senior brother Miao and the others stiffened in midair, their expressions tense as sweat rolled down their foreheads. It wasn't until Lu Yi went far away that they could finally breathe a sigh of relief. They thought that they were doomed just now, but unexpectedly, Yi left just like that. Did he not see them? Of course, that was impossible. They were less than 300 meters away, and Yi wasn't blind, so how could he not have seen them? In that case, he must have simply chosen to ignore them. The rest were fine, relieved at having escaped from death, each celebrating their good fortune. Only senior brother Miao felt ashamed on top of that relief. He was glad that Yi didn't attack them or they would all have died, but he also felt ashamed for even feeling relieved at that. Yi was now in Heaven 9, just like him. Though he had the courage to fight Yi in the same realm, he didn't have the confidence to win against him. To think that he also ranked in the top 50 on the roll of supremacy. Senior brother Miao, one of his junior sisters called out in a trembling voice, "He's coming back." Senior brother Miao turned quickly and there Lu Yi was indeed. He who should have been flying away was now turning back. So was he still going to attack them? Senior brother Miao made up his mind. Even if he had to die in battle today, he had to let this annihilator of sects know that cultivators from Thousand Demon Ridge were not to be trifled with. The flying spirit artifacts stopped at a distance of less than a third of a kilometer from them, which was the limit that a Heaven 9 cultivator could attack. "Are you from Thousand Demon Ridge?" Lu Yi asked. Panicking, senior brother Miao almost released his weapon in response, but after coming to his senses, he nodded solemnly. The man standing in front of him didn't feel like someone on the same level as him but rather a powerful real lake or divine ocean realm cultivator. His shame intensified. Facing Yi, he found that he didn't have the determination he had imagined. He didn't even have the courage to refuse to answer. "Since you seem to know who I am, I won't waste any time. Don't be nervous, I'm not feeling the urge to kill today, so I won't do anything to you." Mainly, killing would be too wasteful. Previously, killing enemies in the Spirit Creek battlefield earned him contributions, but now, not only would he lose contributions for killing, he would even have to spend contributions to buy some flames of earthen spirits to burn the judgment of the heavens. This statement left the eyes of the group twitching. He had just destroyed the New Moon Sect's outpost and killed over 50 people. He called that not having the urge to kill? What do you want? Senior brother Miao steeled himself and asked. Go back and pass on a message to the major sects of Thousand Demon Ridge. Old rules. Sky Sword Peak in 10 days. If I don't get what I want within 10 days, I'll knock on each door one by one to pay you all a visit. With that, Lu Yi turned and left, leaving senior brother Miao and the others behind with uncertain expressions. It wasn't until Lu Ye's figure disappeared that someone asked, Senior brother Miao, what does he mean? Senior brother Miao did not answer. Naturally, he knew what he meant. After all, the same thing happened only a few months ago. At that time, the major core circle sects of Thousand Demon Ridge were unwilling to cooperate. After all, who would be willing to give away so many resources for no reason, and to one's enemies at that? But following Ye's battle against an elite-level spirit beast, achieving the status of an elite-level existence as a mere Spirit Creek realm cultivator, the sects that were unwilling to cooperate had no choice but to comply. When one's fist was smaller than another's, and with many previous examples laid out before oneself, what else could one do but cooperate? Compared to the resources they had to give out, the losses they would incur by having their outposts destroyed were unimaginable. Let's go! Senior brother Miao called out and quickly led the group towards their own outpost. He had to pass on the news quickly. As for the rest, it was not something he, a Spirit Creek realm cultivator, could consider. The experts of the sect would handle it. In less than 2 hours, Lu Ye's request was brought forward by senior brother Miao and quickly transmitted to the major sects of Thousand Demon Ridge. Upon hearing the news, it was not Lu Ye's rude request that the major sects were more concerned about, but his current condition. Based on the observations of senior brother Miao and his group, there was not a trace of purple lightning coiling around Ye's body. He was quite clearly in a normal state. This puzzled the countless experts of Thousand Demon Ridge. More than 50 New Moon Sect disciples died by Ye's hands, and the cultivators that escaped from the outpost personally saw Ye being surrounded by purple lightning, but how long had it been? How could the judgment of the heavens that struck fear even into the hearts of divine ocean realm cultivators have vanished out of nowhere? Only after senior brother Miao and the rest made the heavenly oath was this news seen as confirmed. The Thousand Demon Ridge couldn't help but be bewildered. They had hoped that Yi would not be able to endure the soul-destroying torment, and even if he didn't die, he would find it difficult to come out and stir up trouble. However, it seemed now that he had suppressed or even eliminated the judgment of the heavens, entwining his body by some unknown means. Thousand Demon Ridge was more inclined to believe the former possibility. After all, the existence of an ability that could eliminate the punishment of the heavens seemed hard to believe. They remembered that woman from the Crimson Blood sect, called Mo Yuan. She had forcibly entered the Spirit Creek battlefield twice, killing a good number of Thousand Demon Ridge cultivators, and came out unscathed even after facing heaven's punishment. Did the Crimson Blood sect truly possess some special and incredible means that could suppress heaven's punishment? If that were the case, things would become troublesome. Facing the annihilator of sects, they could neither fight him nor defend against him. Other than obediently cooperating with him and appeasing his anger, it seemed there were no other options. Most of the sects of Thousand Demon Ridge were discontented because the cultivators who had given Yi trouble in the Carnage Coliseum were not their own, yet they had to suffer such undeserved calamity. Yi clearly had no idea who had bothered him in the Carnage Coliseum either, so he simply decided to deal with all of them in one fell swoop. How could they be content with this? A few months ago, they had already sent some peace money to Lu Yi, which was a sense of shame that Thousand Demon Ridge couldn't wash away. Now, a few months later, were they going to experience this humiliation again? What was the difference between that and rubbing salt into their wounds? Most importantly, Yi was from the Crimson Blood sect, and the Crimson Blood sect was under the Grand Sky Coalition. The peace offerings sent by so many first, second, and third-tier sects, when combined, constituted a huge amount of resources, perfectly feeding their enemy. Such a large bounty would allow the Crimson Blood sect no need to worry about its acolytes' cultivation expenses for decades. It was said that the monthly salary of the Crimson Blood sect acolytes was comparable to that of the top first-tier sect in Jianghu. Even the treatment of some initiates was better than that of many major sections. A ninth-tier sect like them could only afford such generous treatment for its disciples by bleeding resources from the major sects of Thousand Demon Ridge. If it were to happen again, heavens knows how the Crimson Blood sect would develop in the future. Fortunately, Yi gave them 10 days to prepare, just like last time. So, there was still room for negotiation on Thousand Demon Ridge's side. Whether to compromise or not was a big question. Many Divine Ocean Realm cultivators from different sects gathered together in order to discuss this matter. Soon, someone raised a crucial question. Why didn't Yi kill Senior Brother Miao and his group? If his intention was just to deliver a message, leaving one person alive would be enough. What was more, he could even have personally delivered the message to any one of Thousand Demon Ridge's outposts. Senior Brother Miao and the others were all unharmed, and Yi had never shown any intention to attack them from beginning to end, a thought-provoking result. Given the strength he showed at the New Moon Sect's outpost, Senior Brother Miao and his group should have had no reason to escape unscathed. Despite the fact that Lu Yi let them go claiming that he wasn't feeling the urge to kill them, his decisions seemed to be full of contradictions upon further contemplation. Yi must have had some concerns that kept him from acting against Senior Brother Miao and his group. This discovery enlightened many of the Divine Ocean Realm cultivators. Someone slowly spoke up. Currently, we are speculating that the Crimson Blood sect might have some special means that can allow them to suppress the judgment of the heavens, but what if this method also comes with some drawbacks? What do you mean, Elder Qin? Someone asked. Elder Qin stroked his beard. This old man has lived for so many years, yet I have never heard of anyone being able to resist heaven's punishment. While the idea of suppressing the heaven's punishment sounds ridiculous, the fact is before us, and I'm willing to believe it for now. However, heaven-defying methods must come with a great price. It's highly likely that Yi was not unwilling to kill, but unable to do so. As soon as these words were spoken, many Divine Ocean Realm cultivators felt enlightened. Someone nodded. There is sense to Elder Chen's words. Perhaps if Yi were to kill again, the judgment of the heavens that is suppressed might erupt even more fiercely. If that's the case, does it mean he was just bluffing? Do you all remember when he broke through the defenses of nearly 30 sects in the core circle at Heaven 9? That was how he forced us to make concessions, but now? Half a day has passed, and if he still had the ability to break through the defenses of a second outpost, why would he not try and exert pressure on us? Chapter 542, This Thing Can Be Overdraft? Inside the hall, as one Divine Ocean Realm expert after another gave their opinion, the situation seemed to become clearer. Regardless of what method Yi used to suppress heaven's punishment, it had to come at a great cost, and at this moment, he probably couldn't kill again. If that was the case, what should the Thousand Demon Ridge have to fear him? He might have the ability to infiltrate others' outposts, but on the premise that he was restricted from killing, his threat to Thousand Demon Ridge was almost negligible. Of course, this was just a speculation, and they couldn't be sure until they had firm evidence in their hands. It's easy to verify it, someone spoke up. First, we find out Yi's location, then we send a group of Heaven 9 cultivators to probe him together to see whether or not he can still kill. That sounds reasonable, let's proceed like that. Does anyone have any opinions? I agree. No objections. I have a suggestion. Let's try to find Heaven 9 cultivators in the role of supremacy. If they're too weak, they won't be able to verify anything. Furthermore, if possible, we may be able to seize the opportunity to eliminate him. Very well, let's settle it at that. My 100 Pass sect can send one person. The Seacliff Pavilion will send one person. My Flying Thunder cult will send one person. With the contributions of each Divine Ocean Realm cultivator, They quickly formed a team of about 20 to 30 people, all of whom were from the role of supremacy, with no shortage of those who ranked in the top 20. Then please send word to the Spirit Creek battlefield and have them make their move as soon as possible, said an elderly divine ocean realm cultivator who had been silent in the chief's seat this whole while. After receiving their orders, they immediately began to spread the message. However, it was at that moment that some news seemed to come from the outside. Many divine ocean realm masters checked the messages one after another. After a short while, everyone's expressions became serious. Even the divine ocean realm elder who had spoken earlier furrowed his brow and raised his hand to say, "Let's put what we were discussing on hold for now." He looked around with his seemingly cloudy eyes and slowly spoke. "We've received information that just a quarter of an incense stick of time ago, the outpost of the Clouded Sun clan was breached by Yi, and more than 10 people were killed." As soon as he spoke, the entire hall fell silent. They were just discussing how they were going to verify their previous speculation, but now it seemed there was no need to verify anything. Yi had already attacked the Clouded Sun clan's outpost, invalidating their previous conjecture. Where the gazes of many converged, a divine ocean realm expert, whose eyes seemed to be spewing fire, gritted his teeth and cursed, "That little bastard." This man was a divine ocean realm cultivator from the Clouded Sun sect, and coincidentally, he also happened to receive the information from his clan about what had happened in the Spirit Creek battlefield while he was here. Though in comparison, the casualties sustained by their acolytes were much lower compared to the New Moon sect, it was mainly because they had learned from the New Moon sect's experience and quickly evacuated their men. Otherwise, with Iye's proclivities, there would likely have been rivers of blood and mountains of corpses. "Who has a 10-point map of the Spirit Creek battlefield?" the elder presiding over the discussion asked. Never did he expect that a divine ocean realm expert like himself would still have to personally inquire about the matters in the Spirit Creek battlefield, but the Spirit Creek realm was the foundation of every sect, and this matter had reached a point where he needed to make personal inquiries. "I have one." At the emergence of that sentence, a 10-point map of the Spirit Creek battlefield was taken out, and the divine ocean realm expert poured his spiritual power into it while someone else raised their hand to construct a peculiar glyph. The glyph and the detailed map were connected, and in the next moment, a large image appeared before everyone's eyes. The image projected was that of the 10-point map of the Spirit Creek battlefield. The New Moon sect's outpost is not that close to the Clouded Sun clan's outpost, but it's not far either. The presiding elder looked at the map and continued, "With Iye's strength, he should be able to reach there in less than half a day, so the timing matches up. However, several other outposts of other sects between the two of them. Why did Yi leave those outposts alone and specifically attack the Clouded Sun clan's outpost?" From Iye's route of action, he seemed to be targeting the Clouded Sun clan's outpost specifically. "Brother Fu, is there any reason behind this?" The divine ocean realm expert from the Clouded Sun clan, the one surnamed Fu, had an unsightly expression on his face. "We received news earlier that an acolyte named Wei Kei from our clan participated in the siege against Yi in the Carnage Coliseum. That's most likely the reason why Yi came to our doorstep." At his words, the faces of many divine ocean realm cultivators also became unsightly. First, there was Tan Sheng from the New Moon sect, and now Wei Kei from the Clouded Sun clan. Yi was acting with specific targets in mind. However, they weren't the only ones who participated in the siege against Yi. Many of them had acolytes under their wings that were involved as well. Did this mean that Yi would also come to their outposts? Some weren't able to determine this as they didn't know whether the acolytes of their sects were involved in what happened in the Carnage Coliseum or not. This was a risky situation. They quickly sent messages out, warning the acolytes in the Spirit Creek battlefield to be on alert and to immediately retreat to Jianghu as soon as they discovered Iye's tracks. If the outpost was breached, there was no way the blessings of the Divine Opportunity Column could be maintained, but the most important thing now was to ensure the safety of their own acolytes. "Brother Fu, did the heavens enact punishment on Yi after he killed those men?" The cultivator surnamed Fu responded, "I'll inquire about it." He sent a message back to his clan to ask about the situation, and it wasn't long before a response came back. Yes, purple lightning was coiling around his body as soon as he made a move against the first person. The nearly 100 divine ocean realm experts in the hall fell silent. They couldn't figure out what the situation was with Yi. They had initially speculated that he had a special method to suppress heaven's punishment, but the information they now received didn't seem to make sense. If he had the means of suppressing the punishment, then the purple lightning shouldn't have appeared around him, but if he didn't suppress it, how could Yi remain unscathed? After a while, the presiding elder spoke. A few months ago, our 1,000-demon ridge gave in to his demands. In just a few months, Yi has once again made such impertinent demands. We shouldn't encourage this kind of deviant behavior. Otherwise, he might come every few months. Then should we be expected to compromise every single time? Everyone fell silent. On careful thought, even though Yi was despicable in some ways, he could still be considered a reasonable person. He stopped troubling the sects of the 1,000-demon ridge after receiving the peace offering from them last time, and it wasn't long before he advanced into the Cloud River realm and left the Spirit Creek battlefield. It wasn't that he acted without reason this time either. If it wasn't for the targeted attack he suffered in the Carnage Coliseum, he probably wouldn't have come to the Spirit Creek battlefield. Of course, even if they thought that way, they wouldn't say it out loud. What do you think, Elder Chin? Someone asked. Let's send some people into the Spirit Creek battlefield and negotiate with him. His actions seem to indicate that he's not just a reckless person. He should also be aware of the consequences if he acts too recklessly. After Elder Chin laid out his plan, the other divine ocean realm experts nodded in agreement. Since Yi had given them a 10-day deadline like last time, it would be better to talk to him first regardless of the outcome. It didn't seem like an optimistic move, but what if negotiations came out successful? Even if they couldn't reach an agreement, they still had 10 days to prepare. They couldn't just give him whatever he wanted, otherwise, what would happen to the pride of the 1,000-demon ridge cultivators when they went out in the future? Were they shameless? While the divine ocean realm experts were talking, in the Clouded Sun clan's outpost, Lu Yi had immersed his mind into his consciousness and was examining the tree of glyphs. A large cloud of gray smoke rose from the tree, indicating that its fuel was still abundant. Mainly, it was because he hadn't killed too many people this time. It wasn't that he didn't want to, he just didn't get to. As soon as the cultivators of the Clouded Sun clan realized that Lu Yi had entered their outpost, they quickly began evacuating and all left in just a short period of time. This also made things easier for Lu Yi. The only thing that made him feel helpless were his contribution points. He had already spent all his contribution points earlier on flames of earthen spirits to fuel the tree of glyphs. As a result, the contribution points section on his battlefield imprint showed that he owed a total of 435 contribution points. It was a first for Lu Yi to find out that contribution points could actually be owed. It was eye-opening. It seems the heavens would never make a losing deal. Lu Yi could only sigh. Fortunately, he still gained some spoils of war. After sorting through them, he tossed them all into the Vault of Providence. Only then did he pay off all the contribution points owed and even earn a little bit extra outside of that. Lu Yi didn't know what kind of consequences one might face for owing contribution points to the heavens, as no one had tried such a thing before. After all, who would owe contribution points in the first place? However, he had been plagued with a feeling of unease from the moment he began owing those contribution points, as if something bad might happen to him at any moment. Owing contribution points seemed like it could potentially affect his own luck and make things go awry. Even someone with such remarkable luck as he felt that way upon owing contribution points. So it was not difficult to imagine that consequences would befall an ordinary person if they faced the same situation. They might stumble while walking and even choke while drinking water. As the tree of glyphs continued to burn, the purple thunder lingering around Lu Ye's body gradually dissipated. Tao Jianghu emerged from the Sanctum of Providence with an excited expression. Fifth senior brother, where are we going next? Following his fifth senior brother around had given him a taste of greatness, and there weren't any risks to it at all. They could even plunder the blessings of others' outposts, including the outposts of core circle sections. After plundering 2 of them, he had reaped abundant gains. Though the plundered blessings had to be converted into contribution points at their own outpost, as the current legate in charge of the Crimson Blood Sect's outpost, he could even do himself a little favor and distribute a monthly salary to himself. Without even mentioning anything else, there was no longer any need for him to worry about not having enough contribution points to buy heaven-grade cultivation disciplines in the future. This could also be considered his business trip expenses for following his 5th senior brother. He believed his 2nd senior sister should allow it. Looking back, none of the previous legates of the Crimson Blood Sect had ever had the opportunity to plunder blessings from multiple enemy outposts like him and his 5th senior brother. He was extremely proud to be initiated into the Crimson Blood Sect. In the past, he was just an independent cultivator, living a lonely and destitute life, unable to secure enough resources for his cultivation. However, after joining the Crimson Blood Sect, life became better day by day. Now, the monthly salary he received from the sect was comparable to the treatment of disciples from the first-tier sects. For this reason alone, he was the envy of 90% of the Spirit Creek Realm cultivators in Jianghu. Chapter 543, The Annihilator of Sect's Hobby. The Crimson Blood Sect had formed alliances with numerous inner circle and core circle sections. Once their disciples reached a certain level of cultivation, they were free to choose where they wished to train. Recently, many of the Crimson Blood Sect's disciples had left the outpost and entered the inner circle. Some chose to take shelter with other sects' outposts, while others, like the Forerunner Jianghu, chose to venture into the inner circle alone. The choice was entirely up to the individual. No one was forced into anything. Disciples from their allied sects were also sent to the Crimson Blood Sect to cultivate, further strengthening the sect's power. A few days ago, there was an insectoid attack, but instead of worrying, the Crimson Blood Sect simply saw them as a great source of contribution points, not stopping until they'd completely exhausted the energy of the nucleus of life in their nest. In the battlefield of the outer circle, the Crimson Blood Sect's outpost undoubtedly stood as a mighty force. In a radius of 1,000 kilometers from the Crimson Blood Sect's outpost, no 1,000 Demon Ridge cultivators dared to tread recklessly. It was said that several nearby 1,000 Demon Ridge forces were even planning to relocate their outposts. They had no choice. Life had become too difficult, and what else could they do but move? There aren't any targets left. Lu Yi stood up upon hearing Tao Jingyu's inquiry and stretched his back. He also wanted to move on to the next target, but it was best not to go overboard sometimes. No matter how one looked at it, he was bullying the weak this time, which was a little different from back when he was in Heaven 9. Of course, the main point was that he didn't know the origins of the 9th Order Cloud River Realm cultivators who had attacked him in Carnage Coliseum. Otherwise, he could just openly go after them. He only knew Tan Sheng and Wei Kei's origins because of Li Baxian and Xia Chanxian. There was also a blade wielder that others referred to as Xia Liang. He seemed to come from the Raving Bladesmen. The blade technique insights that he needed seemed to have shown themselves. Oh, Tao Jingyu hummed a response without protest. Though somewhat disappointed, he didn't push the matter. The gains from this trip were already abundant. Take junior brother Tao back to the outpost, and be careful on the way. Lu Yi instructed. Understood. You take care too, Yi responded as she summoned her flight-type artifact. She had her own flight-type artifact, but following Lu Yi all the time, she never had the opportunity to use it. After a while, Yi rose to the skies with Tao Jingyu and flew in the direction of the Crimson Blood Sect's outpost. She and Amber could both exert strength at the level of Heaven 9, so they hardly encountered any danger in this Spirit Creek battlefield, especially now that all the major 1,000 Demon Ridge sects were on high alert, wary of Lu Ye's arrival. None of the powerful cultivators would be wandering around. But with their strength, even if they bumped into a couple of Heaven 9 cultivators, they would still be able to handle them. That was why Lu Yi wasn't concerned about Yi and Amber's safety at all. After checking his 10-point map, Lu Yi also quickly summoned his own flight-type artifact and stepped onto it, flying leisurely in one direction. he was heading to Skysword Peak to wait for the offerings sent over by Thousand Demon Ridge. After all that busy work, it was time to reap the rewards. The agreed-upon time was 10 days, so there was no need to hurry. He wandered around leisurely, feeling quite carefree. While he was enjoying himself, many Thousand Demon Ridge cultivators were in the midst of suffering. Almost every one of Thousand Demon Ridge's outposts had received warnings from their sect to stay on guard against Yi. If they were to find his tracks, they were to immediately withdraw back to Jianghu. This caused almost all the cultivators in the Thousand Demon Ridge's core circle outposts to be on high alert, for fear that the annihilator of sects would suddenly attack. And there was no need to mention just how on edge the sects that were close to the Clouded Sun Clan's outpost were. But despite waiting and waiting, no one saw any sign of the annihilator of sects. After destroying the outpost of the Clouded Sun Clan, he disappeared without a trace. 2 days later, Lu Yi arrived at Skysword Peak. He had been here once several months ago to wait for the Thousand Demon Ridge's peace offering, and he thought he would never come here again after leaving the Spirit Creek battlefield, but he didn't expect to come back again and do the same thing as he did several months ago. Life truly was unpredictable. After landing on the Spirit Peak, Lu Yi found a flat rock and sat cross-legged on it, his inviolable saber right beside him. Looking at the sea of clouds rolling in front of him, Lu Yi suddenly regretted giving such a long deadline to the Thousand Demon Ridge. It was impossible for him to cultivate in the Spirit Creek battlefield since his cultivation had already exceeded the level of the Spirit Creek realm. So, even if he took in the spiritual energy from this heaven and earth or consumed spirit pills, neither had any effect. But there was nothing he could do about that. He could only take out the books he had gotten from Lady Yun and study them. He had already gone through these books more than once, but each time he reviewed them, he would gain something new. He also learned some interesting glyphs from the books, but as they were not on the tree of glyphs, constructing them would require extensive practice, all the while carrying a risk of failure. Up till now, the most useful glyph he had learned from these books was glyph void. Without glyph void, he wouldn't have been able to survive multiple near-death experiences in the Carnage Colosseum, nor could he have persisted for so long under the pursuit of so many powerful cultivators. This was a very promising glyph, and Lu Yi had always thought that there must be a similar glyph on the Tree of Glyphs. However, he had not been able to unlock it and didn't know which leaf it was on. If he could unlock that glyph on the Tree of Glyphs, it would make setting up teleportation wards much easier in the future. With one fixed-point teleportation ward, he could return to it at any time through the use of glyph void as long as he was within range of it, and he wouldn't have to worry about setting up multiple wards. The glyph itself had the effect of teleportation, and the purpose of using it as the core of the ward was to make the glyph more robust and stable. Without the framework of a ward and no one to maintain it, glyphs were easily destroyed. He could even construct the glyph on his own spirit artifact to develop new means of killing enemies. Of course, these were all just ideas that he pondered during his leisure time. To accomplish such a thing, he would need to get the right leaf burning on the Tree of Glyphs. While he was studying on Skysword Peak, two figures flew out on their flight-type artifacts from the outpost of a core circle sect. They were one man and one woman. The man appeared to be in his 30s or 40s, with a majestic appearance and a tall and imposing figure, clearly someone in a high position. The woman had a beautiful appearance, and it was simply impossible to tell her exact age from looks alone. She could be 16 to 17, or 24 to 25. She had a tall figure, but what was rare was her supple figure. Both of them were experts in the Ninth Order Real Lake realm. Never in their lives had they imagined that they would still have the opportunity to enter the Spirit Creek battlefield, let alone with the mission of negotiating with a brat on the Cloud River realm. The matter had been discussed by the Divine Ocean realm experts, and in the end, the two of them were chosen to come. The main reason was because this matter was neither big nor small, so it was not appropriate for the Divine Ocean realm experts to come in person. If the negotiations failed and the situation became awkward, then it would be difficult to wrap up the situation once a fight broke out. Of course, the most important reason was Lu Ye's domineering strength. These Divine Ocean realm experts really did not have the confidence to defeat him. It would be fine if they won the fight, but what if they lost? They were all divine ocean realm cultivators, so how could they explain it to the world when they were pressed on the ground by a kid who was barely 18 and taught a lesson by him? So, after much discussion, they decided that it was more appropriate for a cultivator in the real lake realm to handle the negotiations. Firstly, it showed their sincerity, and the real lake realm cultivators were also confident in being able to keep the negotiation under control. Originally, 2 male candidates were chosen, but just as they were concluding the matter, one divine ocean realm expert spoke up and replaced one of them with the woman instead. The flower basket-like flight-type artifact flying in the sky looked beautiful, complementing the woman's stunning beauty and curvaceous figure, enough to attract the gaze of almost all the men in the world. Yun Qingyue stood on the flower basket, looking up at the rolling clouds in the sky, feeling a little annoyed inside. It wasn't just because of the occasional glances she felt from behind, but also the instructions given by that divine ocean realm senior before their departure. She didn't know where that divine ocean realm senior had obtained the information, but it was said that the annihilator of sex had no preferences other than women who were big and round, and that was why she was chosen to replace the original negotiation candidate, all in hopes that she could perform well. On one hand, her figure suited the annihilator of sex taste, and on the other hand, her appearance made it difficult to gauge her age, making it easy for people to mistake her for a young girl in her teens, which could lower Iye's guard. It was not abnormal for a hot-blooded young man, only 17 or 18, to have a fondness for beautiful women. With so many female cultivators in Thousand Demon Ridge, why did they choose her specifically? But the divine ocean realm expert had spoken, and she had no room to refuse. She had no other choice but to grit her teeth and go, only hoping she would not suffer too much humiliation. The strength of a Spirit Creek realm cultivator at the elite level was not something she could contend with. As for the rumor that the annihilator of sex liked women who were big and round, she heard that it had supposedly been verified. When he challenged the role of supremacy, he had killed practically all the opponents he faced, regardless of gender, save for a single woman called Bailan, who was big and round. Even female cultivators were killed, showing that Yi was not soft-hearted towards the fairer sex, but inexplicably he spared Bailan, which naturally made people ponder. Junior Sister Yun, there's no need to be so anxious. That brat gave a 10-day deadline and it's only been 2 days. With our speed, we'll be able to reach Skysword Peak in a day, said Wu Jun, who followed behind Yun Qingyue. They weren't of the same sect, but they had interacted during their youth. Speaking of which, he had once been infatuated with this junior sister Yun. After all, Yun Qingyue was a heavenly beauty that drove all the young people in all of the Thousand Demon Ridge crazy during their generation. It was rare for someone to see her appearance and not be moved. Unfortunately, he was a nobody then and only had the qualification to admire her from afar. Now, he was also a cultivator in the 9th Order Real Lake realm with a chance of breaking through into the Divine Ocean realm in the future. He was no longer the young and humble youth of the past and had gained some composure. Though he still found this heavenly beauty pleasing to the eye, he wouldn't have other thoughts about her. Still, it was rare to be able to go on a mission with the dream goddess of his youth, and he did find it enjoyable to some extent, so he wasn't in a hurry to rush over. In fact, he even hoped to take the journey slow. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.